that we have not done enough to justify this. Our social education around this has not been successful, and we need to do some more civic education around why empowering women has the effect of empowering the whole community in the long run, or let's say in the medium term. What would be my solution about this? Of all the ones we have tried, I think only one can succeed, and that is to abolish the woman's seat, to abolish the seat of the woman representative completely, and then to create 2 seats in every constituency, one for a woman and one for a man. In fact, we end up with 50% being women. We improve, we do better than the 30% that we already have. And that one is neat. It is achievable without much mathematics, arithmetics, and it is straightforward. That would be my proposal. There is an issue you put to me, honorable members, that is...
Sorry, Prof, sorry. You said 290 times 2. That's how many? 580?
Oh, you know, my original proposal is that we reduce the constituencies. So we would first reduce the constituencies, then have to about 100 constituencies, then have 1 man, 1 woman in each of those 100 constituencies. Yes. Yes. And the office and status of a member of parliament will be restored. There is one issue, ladies and gentlemen, honorable members, you asked me to talk about, and that is the issue of socioeconomic rights, which is the issue of the cost of living. This is a chicken and egg problem that is, in my view, very, very hard to. We need the economy to function at a certain level in order to produce goods and services that allow us to distribute. It is the legendary Tom Mboya in the ideological debates of the 60s that he held with senior Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. And the grand old man, Jaramogi, was talking about distributing wealth. And Tom Mboya kept reminding him that we need to create the wealth first. That problem is alive today as it was in the 1960s. We need to create wealth in order to distribute it. And therefore, socioeconomic rights are economic rights. Socioeconomic rights are important, fundamental rights in the Constitution. But we need to fund them. In order to respect them, we need to be able to fund them. So we need the economy to grow. We are in a chicken and egg position. We need the economy to grow in order for us to fund socioeconomic rights. The economy is not growing, therefore we are not funding. So that is the problem. That is the problem. Because no matter which government is in control, our envelope, our financial envelope is the same. And as long as that envelope is not growing, we will not be able. We will not be able to give free meals in schools, which, as many of you know, that would be a big game changer, because our students sometimes perform very poorly because they haven't eaten. They just haven't had a good meal. They can't stay awake in the class, and so on. So if we could fund that, it would be a huge game changer. To fund it is a huge budgetary item. And I could go to many other important socioeconomic concerns. So My suggestion is that we need to progressively enforce socioeconomic rights, progressively, and in the communities that deserve them the most. We used to say that the majesty of French law is that it treats the king in his castle the same way it treats the beggar in the street. That cannot be a very good law, can it? We cannot treat everybody equally because not everybody is in the same circumstances. When we enforce socioeconomic laws, we must start with the most vulnerable, so that the most vulnerable are attended to first, with the most basic needs, so that they can live a minimum dignity that is accorded to them. Now, let me say something about, I've talked about the two-thirds. This issue of defecting from political parties, this also is as old as our history, honorable members. In fact, the first thing that happened after independence, on the anniversary of independence and on the birth of the republic, is that people crossed floors. Kadu crossed the floor. Kadu was the opposition. It crossed the floor. I think the last man who was left screaming and kicking was Joseph Martin Shukuk. And I remember at that time, from the reading I have done, there wasn't a lot of noise about the democratic character of crossing the floor. But in '66, when KPU was formed and KPU crossed the floor, the very erudite Joseph Thomas Moyer was very, very, very critical. I was saying to cross the floor is to lose the mandate of the party that elected you. Now, and I have a sympathy. Yes, please. I have sympathy for that. I think that we should have in law mechanisms of containing persons to the parties to the parties on whose platform they were elected. So that's my opinion on that. Now, what is the last issue?
Not clear, sorry. Yeah. Just make it clear. What is your position on that?
My position is that if I presented myself to the people of Kamukunji as a member of the Kenya African National Union, and I was elected as such, I should be obligated, if I am to continue for the 5 years, to retain fidelity to that party, the party on whose platform I was elected. If I crossed the floor and became, in fact, and voted with and became associated with the Kenya African Democratic Union, then I should vacate my seat and a by-election should be held. That's my opinion. It is not a popular opinion, I know, among politicians. However, you told me to come and talk about my opinion. Let me now tell you an even more unpopular, let me give you a more unpopular view, and it is my last one. I do not believe, as a constitutional lawyer and historian, that there is any justification for any fund. There is no justification for the Constituency Development Fund. There is no justification for Affirmative Action Fund, and there is no justification for Senate Override Fund. We have one government at two levels. We have a national government. The fund of the national government is in the Treasury. It is kept by the National Cabinet Secretary to the Treasury. The second fund is the governor, is in the county. It is kept by the governor. Any other fund has no place in our constitutional architecture. There should be only money in two levels: the national level and at the county level. Let me tell you why I have another difficulty with this. I have another difficulty with our members of parliament, our honorable members of parliament, becoming both the appropriators of fund, debating the budget, appropriating cash, then following the cash themselves, yes, and spending the cash. I think it blurs the roles, because the work of parliament is to tax and to spend, then to oversight, right? So I don't feel very comfortable when the member of parliament has fought very hard for money to go to Kiambu County. Then before it arrives, it finds him sitting in the constituency. So that is a personal view, but one that I hold very strongly. I would like to see my senator and my member of parliament oversighting, calling, and I have seen the Senate, for example, is very, very, very robust on this role. And I think that's the correct role. Says to the governor, this is the report we have received. Tell us how you spent this money. If the senator was down there himself spending some money, I think the ability to ask another spender how he spent might be compromised. So unfortunately, I don't support that. Now, finally, do I oppose the setting up of the office of leader of the official opposition? No, I don't oppose at all. Actually, I think it makes politics neater. It makes politics neater. It keeps this general closer to his troops, or to her troops for that matter. The truth is, in a democracy, the opposition is a government in waiting. And therefore, in fact, the opposition has shadow cabinet ministers. So they should be operating in parliament, shadowing the other cabinet minister, asking them questions that are informed and that help to show that this party, at the next election, they are ready. They are ready to be the government. They are responsible, they are organized, and that is their general there, the leader of the official opposition. And he is accorded all due. In a democracy, the leader of the opposition actually has such high level of security clearance that he is briefed. He is briefed the same way the president is briefed. If there are national security questions, he's briefed. If there are internal threats, external threats, he's briefed. If they are visiting delegations and so on, the leader of the opposition is briefed. So that, and that is why in a democracy, we call it the royal opposition, the loyal opposition. The opposition is not a hostile. It's not a hostile group of people. It is part and parcel of government. It is loyal. The opposition is loyal to the government of the day. Because after the next election, chances are that the opposition will be the government and the government will be the opposition. That's the way it should work. Finally, the Prime Cabinet Secretary, I have no problem with that. I think it is a way of organizing cabinet to make it more efficient, to make it more. I found out in my time in the cabinet that cabinet works best if the committee systems work. But the committee systems are very difficult to organize if there isn't somebody who is chairing them, bringing them together, and supervising them. The president cannot do that. He's very busy. The vice president is very busy deputizing. And by default, I did find at one point when we had a very, very heavy legislative agenda immediately after the new constitution, I found myself playing that role, bringing people to the state law office and organizing around the legislation that we had. So I would have no difficulty with that at all. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I spoke for too long. Your Excellency, Honorable Dr. Kalonzo, you were not here before, so I would like to acknowledge you. And that's my presentation.
Thank you very much, Professor, for that very incisive engagement with quite a number of unpopular views, with as you said, with the political class. Maybe on a light note, is that how the case on NGCDF was lost in court when you were AG?
Well, it was lost in the Supreme Court after I had left. By the way, when I was there, and this my colleagues on the will confirm, a lawyer never argues his opinion. He argues his instructions. When the case first started, my instructions from the government of the day was to support CDF, and we supported CDF. Now, today I'm speaking as a citizen.
Well, I want to be the first to go, Prof, and to tell you how pleased I am to see you this morning and to listen to your very candid views about issues that are confronting us as a country and which we find are engaging the mandate of this committee. So thank you for volunteering to come and hear us, and we'll hear you. One of the things that I would want to have your views on is, we know our bicameral nature of legislature, the National Assembly and the Senate. Occasionally, we have instances of sibling rivalry. So you get the feeling the Senate is being sat upon by the National Assembly. And of course, the chair of the Parliamentary Service Commission happens to be the Speaker of the National Assembly. So what would be your view? I once visited Nigeria to see a friend who was a Speaker of the Senate, because they'd invited me to the National Prayer Breakfast, the first edition of the same in Nigeria. His name was David. And he was, because the Speaker of the Senate, he was the chair of the bicameral legislature. David Mack was his name. And I find that personally, because of what you said, the oversight role of the Senate, even in our country, seems to be more defined as presently constituted than, forgive me, majority leader and minority leader, the National Assembly, than it is in the case of the National Assembly. What would be your view? Wouldn't we probably just be candid about this? As you've been candid about the funds, you don't like them, and it is very, very clear. That's my number one comment. The next one is, it has to do with rights. I'm sure you're a preeminent lawyer, human rights. I'm sure it's also within your province. constitutional law notwithstanding, if you give a people a constituency, and then they hear that this committee, in its wisdom or lack of it, has come up with recommendations to do away with 190 constituencies, wouldn't you think that is disenfranchising our people? And the more practical thing is, in fact, when the boundaries delimitation team is in place, we'll be hearing them. You'll be hearing people saying, we want, because the closer the administration is, the closer the member of parliament is to the people, the MCA, the better it is. Because the maximum, there can be no taxation without representation. And this issue of taxation, I don't know whether you really dealt with it, the high cost of living. Eugene, I'm sure if he gets a time, he'll be able to address you extensively on that. Because you said the role of the MP is to tax and then to collect revenue, tax, and then oversight. This is the ideal situation. So on those 2 points, I really would want to gain your wisdom. And as I said, it's so good to see you again. I was vice president when you were attorney general, and clearly this country owes you plenty. I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Kocha, AG, we will ask you to be noting the questions we take around, then you will answer. Maybe I'll go second round before I give the Honorable Pio and I, Hassan Omar, then Honorable Eugene Omaro. And Wambilianga will close for us if Mugani will not have any. You spoke on the question of the constitution of IEPC, and you did indicate that the IPPG model was what you described as an unmitigated disaster for the country. And you seem to prefer the professional mode of appointment of IPPG. I just want clarification whether that would be what has been proposed by one of the professional organizations as going for a professional sort of human resource consultant to recruit the commissioners, or the current model that we have where you have a panel that then goes to look out for professionals through a competitive process. I want to hear your view on that. What, in your view, would be that professional model to use? Then, in reconstituting that IEBC, from your experience as AG, because you say you are involved in the reconstitution of IEBC, and I believe the time you were AG, it was a panel model that was used, as it still is in the laws today. Do you think that panel system as it is today sufficiently covers all stakeholders, or are there stakeholders that you feel we would be able to incorporate in that panel system? Okay.
Thank you very much, and I'll be very quick. AG, just on the same issue of the IPPG. In fact, I was rather surprised when you described the IPPG as unmitigated disaster. Unmitigated disaster, just to use your words. And yet we know for sure that every time we have reconstituted the IBC, or electoral body for that matter, it has been in response to a political situation. If you agree with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I do.
Then how this IPPG, from my recollection, was meant to address a political situation then, in 1997. Remember, it came at the backdrop of the clamor for reforms. And the mantra then was no reforms, no elections. And it's also documented that the electoral commission that was born out of the IPPG supervised the 1997 elections. Okay. Okay? But it went ahead to supervise the 202 elections. That has been billed as one of the best elections in this country. So then, and in fact, what happened thereafter is what perhaps could have led to a disaster, if I'm not wrong. Because I think 205 or thereabout, the then president, when at the expiry of the term of the Electoral Commission, then the IPPG Electoral Commission, unilaterally appointed commissioners to the commission against the wishes of the opposition, very strong wishes of the opposition. And the rest, as they say, is history. What followed, then you know. Then, what then would motivate you to describe IPPG wholesome as a disaster? Just let me understand. Yet, from where I sit, I thought it was one of the best approaches to dealing with the issue of inclusivity and consensus building. Two, you say you don't agree at all with the matter of revisiting the presidential elections of 2022. That it won't be helpful, it will be futile, to paraphrase you. But what do you make of the clear provision of Article 88, Sub-Article 4H of the Constitution, which requires, let me just read, which requires the IBC to facilitate the observation, monitoring, and evaluation of elections. Elections, all types of elections, the presidential, parliamentary, ward, and so on and so forth. From where we sit, we know the IBC has been able to facilitate the observation and monitoring of the 2022 elections. So far as the evaluation of those elections is concerned, nothing of the sort has been done. Would you be opposed to the evaluation of the elections as contemplated in Article 88 4H? Last, you say you have got no problem with the creation of the office of the leader of opposition. And you seem to suggest that the officer could sit in parliament. But you don't clarify further whether you want this office created within the framework of a parliamentary system, or presidential system, or some sort of hybrid system. Thank you.
Okay, Omar.
Thank you very much. My recollection is that probably the 1997 elections was by far one of the most violent, and they were actually mitigated by the IPPG Electoral Commission. Number two, I think there should be we are not revisiting the Supreme Court decision. That is settled. I do not think we want to create an impression, at least from our side, that we are in any way reopening the Supreme Court verdict or process. We are though open to listening to whether there is a process of auditing the processes so that we continue to improve on the systems and electoral management, but not to revisit in any way the decision of the Supreme Court. But my actual fundamental question to you is on the issue of the ECOSOC rights, economic, social, cultural rights that you articulated yourself to. You know, our Constitution talks in many regards about social justice. And there's a very radical understanding of what social justice is to make those who are worse off better off before those who are better off become well off. So there are those who are better off who are earning taxes or who are earning salaries, and you're asking them to support housing projects for the vulnerable. You're asking them to pay 2.75% to fund affordable and accessible healthcare under the UHC program. That is part of the dictates of the Constitution, that these programs cannot wait under the classical capitalism, that we first, all of us, make wealth before we start to disperse wealth. It must go concurrently. As we are making wealth, we must disperse wealth, and we must disperse part of these advantages that come to protect or to cushion the people at the lowest prism of our society. That's why if you see part of the taxations that is being proposed, it is largely to fund economic and social rights, housing, healthcare, and the such, so that those who have a little more are told to make a small sacrifice, so that those who have nothing are put to a level that they are better off before all of us can become well off. It's actually the constitutional mechanics. So I wanted to slightly you to speak to it, whether this social democracy or democratic socialism, as it is called, isn't about expanding the tax for those who have more and possibly helping those who have less. This outcry, when you are setting up universal health care, when you are setting up housing programs, were outcries that we even saw in the United States when Obamacare was trying to, find a footing, or other social programs were trying to find a footing. The last one, you talked, Opia, you were told you are a government in waiting. The only problem of the opposition is they don't want to wait. But I do agree that Kimani Ichung'wah, as leader of majority, can have a relationship where, in matters of national security, there can be a certain nexus of briefing between the two parties, so that time and again people are appraised with matters of state. The one or two of your radical opinions, but because I'm also in that space of politics, are very popular with me internally, but I cannot express open support for it. I just do believe that there should be clear separations of power, but if this committee should so decide to, as constitutional as the funds, I shall support that position.
I think, Hassan, you have to be bold as you can be in some of these things. We'll hear now Honorable Eugene.
Thank you very much, Prof. I think on the issues of electoral justice, there has been an issue about the last general election. And there are those who have described it as one of the best elections, or one of the most credible elections. But for some of us, we believe this was one of the most incredible elections. We had never seen a situation.
I think Hassan should put off his microphone.
We had never seen a situation where the electoral body is split. It's like a split jury, or almost a hung jury. But in this case, the majority of the commissioners disowned the results. The chairman, with the minority, only 2, upheld the results. And the country found itself in a political and legal terra incognita. It's an unprecedented situation. That's why I'm saying it was not normal. They were not normal elections. And we were particularly looking at the provisions of Article 138, 3C. And the Supreme Court pronounced itself on it by saying the decision of the commission, IEBC, should be a corporate decision in terms of the results, tallying, verifying. It should be a corporate, it cannot be the decision of the chair. And when you come to, of course, Article 138.10, the chair is the one who declares. But in a situation where we have a rogue chair, this time we have the chair and only 2 commissioners. But we can find ourselves in a situation in future where the chair disagrees with the commission, and the chair by himself declares results that probably the rest of the commission does not agree with. The Supreme Court was very clear in interpreting that particular article, that we find, and I quote this ruling, we find that the chairperson cannot arrogate himself the power to verify and tally the results of a presidential election to the exclusion of the other members of the commission. Indeed, Article 138(10) of the Constitution, although the power to declare the results of a presidential election after verification and tallying is vested in the chairperson, he does not, or he does so only as a delegate of the commission with the corporate decision of the commission. Going into the future, we would like to get your opinion on that in terms of advice in putting the country on a more political and legal terra firma in terms of such situations arising in future. What would you advise on that? On the issue of the cost of living, as His Excellency Kalonzo has said, these socioeconomic rights under Article 43 also include the rights under Article 201 on the finance, the taxation, and the equitable taxation of the citizens, and equitable sharing of the tax burden. In the current situation today in this country, there are many Kenyans who cannot put food on the table because of the high cost of living, and particularly the Finance Act 2023 that saw everything going up, particularly the cost of fuel. On fuel alone, we have almost 16 or so levies and taxes that have really increased fuel to unprecedented levels. And we're not talking of just the mamambogas in the village who have to pay over 33 shillings more for kerosene out there in the village. Life is becoming unbearable. Even our journalists here and professionals, anyone with a pay slip today is really an endangered species because of the many taxes. What would you advise? There have been proposals here, and we wanted to hear from you because it is a policy decision, and enjoyment of those socioeconomic rights under Article 43, it's not a favor from the government. Under Article 21, it is the fundamental duty of the state to ensure enjoyment of those rights by the citizen. In terms of policy measures, so if there are wrong policies that have been put in place that have overburdened the citizen, what would you advise in terms of probably reduction of some of the taxes or reviewing of some of those levies on fuel, on electricity? We really would like to hear from you so that we can, as a committee, make appropriate recommendations. Thank you.
Yeah, I think
Catherine was to go first.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Professor, for your presentations. I am one of those who's actually going to agree with you on most of your popular presentations. These are very unpopular amongst politicians, but to some of us, they're very popular. I first want to associate myself with your comment on the 2022 elections and the presidential results. Actually, for the first time, compared to 1997, 2013, 2017, the 2022 was less problematic. This is just the simple reason. On the ballot and on the final day, actually Uhuru was whitewashed at the ballot so badly that he quickly conceded. And next, we also look at one other very unpopular point, and this is a very great idea, where on very fair basis, let us abolish the seat of women rep and create 2 seats in every constituency. The only biggest undoing with that point is the reduction of the constituencies. Is there a way senior professor, which you can modify that point in such a manner that instead of reducing, let us look at a way and get us a way, give us a formula. I know with your wisdom you can, of which we can have these 2 seats, 1 man and 1 woman, introduced in every constituency. And popular as it is, that is the best point that I've had in the better day of today. And clearly, it is clear you have said empowering a woman is like empowering the whole society. So I'm sure if the 2/3 gender rule was to take off, that is the best solution. And I even beg that this committee adopts that kind of policy. Thank you.
Okoma.
Thank you, Chairman. First, you know, having listened to Prof, I'm one of those proud Kenyans who were taught by Professor. He welcomed me to University of Nairobi as a first-year student. The only thing that he was shocked about my person is when I told him the school I'd come from. He wondered whether I never knew that there was a school called Alliance and why I never went to Alliance. But,
Correction, Senator, not a school.
there
was the school called Alliance.
Yes, but happy to see you, Prof. And we are really going to benefit, you know, from your presentation. I hope there will be some written memo that you leave behind that will assist us. Now, we are where we are because we are a country on crossroads. We are trying to find a solution to some of the problems we are facing. Just like the people who wrote the American Constitution in 1787 were trying to address the concerns of the 17 states that were trying to secede. And we need to get solutions that can fit into our own unique local circumstances. Now, on the issue of IEBC, you know, we have had 2 scenarios. IBC commissioners picked through the IPPG model, and the one of 2007 picked through a very professional process where meritocracy was the guiding really thing and technical knowledge. But if you read paragraph 55 of the Supreme Court decision, the Supreme Court judges said, all this, in our view, points to a serious malaise in the governance of an institution entrusted one of the monumental tasks of midwifing our democracy, an institution that obviously needs far-reaching reforms. That was the Supreme Court, and you have said you agree with the Supreme Court. Prof, I would want you to give a comment on whether you deem it to be a success story, the Electoral Commission of Mozambique that is picked through Parliament on the strength of political party representation with an input of civil society, after which they take oath of office to discharge their functions in a very professional manner. Would you, Prof, really have an objection to solve our problems? We also adopt a system that accommodates all the political heavyweights so that we have a confidence-building process in the management of an election. And then we can have the technical staff in our constituencies, our counties, dealing with issues of running and managing an election. I like your comment, taking Mozambique as one of the success stories where political parties pick the electoral commissioners. That's one. Number 2, on the principle in the Constitution that an election should be very viable. Is there any problem if there was to be an audit of the servers just to confirm the results that were announced by IEBC as a way of complying with the Constitution. And then the final question on that paragraph that I've read, 55 of the Supreme Court decision, would you support a reform of IPC that includes the vetting of staff of the commission in view of that finding of the Supreme Court? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Prof. You can take those ones.
Thank you very much for all of you, your kind remarks, especially His Excellency Dr. Kalonzo Musyoka, who have said very kind things about my tenure as the attorney. Those views may not be widely shared, but I treasure that compliment. Now, you asked me, sir, whether we should rethink the bicameral arrangement that is in this country. The truth again is the draft that we drew here in Bomas had the Senate as the upper house and the House and the National Assembly as the lower house. So we, the technicians, thought that that's how a bicameral legislature should work. It is the politicians who reversed the order. And in fact, it was very interesting because I remember people like my late friend and colleague, the Honorable Mutula Kilonzo, who was among those who were opposed to the arrangement in Bomas, the Honorable Kembi Gitura, another friend of mine, they were opposed. And later, they went to the Senate and found that there wasn't the work that they had gone there to do. And they wanted us to find a way, now I was in government with them, of finding work for the Senate that was equal to the status of the Senate. So this is an issue that we can, depending on how widely we want to open the reform process, it is an issue that can usefully be revisited. I personally always conceived of the Senate as the house where our more senior politicians, more experienced, much more, diplomatic, the politicians would be sitting as a house of elders and so on. In fact, in some countries, this upper chamber is not wholly elected, so that it allows, for example, this is a very self-serving example. So, say a professor who has now retired from public service to sit there and comment on bills and so on. So I agree that it is an issue that we can look into. You asked me about if we were to reduce constituencies, are we not disenfranchising people? They were used to being called Kiambu constituency, Kajiado constituency, and now it covers a whole area. I think as long as the resources are available for distribution, I don't think that people would necessarily be seriously concerned. I come from a constituency, not where we are now. And I am not very sure where it reaches to the north. I don't know how far it reaches to the south. I do know that I am here, I have a member of parliament, and I'm happy. If tomorrow I was told Westlands has been added to your constituency, I am not sure I relate specifically to to the loss if if there is efficiency. I think we want members of parliament to be capacitated. It's the resource question. If the MP has the resources to look after the I don't think wananchi worries so much whether they they are next to each other or further away from each other. This cost of living issue, Your Excellency, this is we keep going around with it because essentially it's a resource issue. I think I personally have come to accept the fact that the government has no money of its own. The government has no money of its own. The government has only money raised through taxation, through borrowing, and through gifts. And we have a very complicated problem where I hear the public say, and it's a very important argument, stop taxing. Stop taxing. Kenyans usually also use the word stop overtaxing. Then they say stop borrowing. So stop borrowing and stop taxing and increase spending. Now that is an impossibility. I'm not an economist, but I am a man from the University of Life, and I know that in the University of Life, if you don't tax and you do not borrow and you have not been gifted by somebody, then you don't have it. So we must cut our cloth to fit our resources. I don't believe that we can tax ourselves out into progress. But I do think that the only thing that you can be certain as a human being is death and taxes. Those, they have to be. Now, without making light of that very important question, I think that there are tax policies, and I hear everybody around this room who is saying that tax policies must be stable. If they are not stable, an investor, and I personally worry a lot about local investors, not foreign investors. The local investor is not able to invest within a tax regime that changes too much, that is not stable. And therefore, I agree with all those who have said that that is something we ought to look into. Chairman Shungwa asked me about IPPG, and I think Honorable Andati as well. The truth is this, ladies and gentlemen, and we must talk truth to each other because this is our country. This IPPG model is a horse trading model. It is a horse trading model. And I challenge you, when you retire later in the day, when you do your research, the IPPG IEBC contained individuals who were directly connected with the appointment. I can tell you there were at least 2 lawyers who were lawyers to the appointing party. So it's not as transparent as it would appear. And although it delivered one good election, we also knew that it had its own internal. So what do I think about it? I think that the model that works is a professionalized model. Is the one we have now professionalized sufficiently, but not fully? And that's where we need to fix. We need to fully professionalize. And this now brings me to the question by Honorable Andati. I agree entirely that part of the crisis that arose out of the unilateral appointments that came post IPPG. Because those unilateral appointments created the political impression that there was no commitment to fairness. And I agree that that was not the right thing to do. And maybe had that not been done, probably the crisis that we had in 2007, 2008 could have been avoided. But we have the hindsight of history. I agree with those who say the election is over. The Supreme Court has pronounced itself on it. We are not looking to audit it for accuracy. We are looking to audit process for improvement. Those are two different arguments, and my problem was with the first one, and I think my very good friend, the Honorable Amalwa, gave me the impression that like he would have wanted an audit that goes to an examination of outcome. That's what I said I don't think would be useful. An audit that would go to investigate whether there was system failure at any point and whether that system can be improved so that it never misfires again, I think that nobody would quarrel with that. Now, Honorable Omar, socioeconomic rights, Honorable Omar says, and where shall we fund this? Where shall we fund social justice from? And I would concede the argument that we must fund it from taxes. There is no other way to affordable housing. There is no other way to healthcare. There is no other way to schooling. There is no other way to a decent environment. We are just about to have an El Nino that will put hundreds of thousands of Kenyans living by the riversides of our country in grave and mortal danger. And the only way we can protect that is again to spend more. We have to spend more on protecting that. And unfortunately, I have a feeling we would have to either borrow or tax. And that is the reality of it. Honorable Amalwa wanted to know whether there is Article 138 of the Constitution, whether there is a distinction between the chair and the commission. I believe there is. Whether the decision declared by the Electoral Commission is that of the chair or of that of the commission, it must be that of the commission. And the Supreme Court did find in this particular case that that was the decision of the commission, because all the commissioners, including those who allegedly denounced the election, had participated in the tallying of the vote. And the distinction between participating in that and participating in the announcement was dealt with, in my very humble view, quite sufficiently by the Supreme Court. Equitable taxation, yeah, again, I agree with that. I agree that taxation must create equity. But I also believe that in a democracy such as ours, those who have the resources, like members of parliament, must be taxed more. so that we can be able to provide for the community and the society. And those like university professors who don't earn a lot should be taxed less because they do not have the resources. And school teachers who earn even less should be taxed less. So I agree that there ought to be equity in taxation.
Information, Prof. Not just equity. I refer you to the provisions of Article 201 B1. And I read, the burden of taxation shall be shared fairly, not even equitably.
Yes.
Fairly.
Yes. I thank you for that guidance, and I think that it makes my point better. There is one controversial position I have held about tax, and I think I've already been controversial enough for one morning. But I have always felt that we are getting into a time and an age in this country where some of the estates of deceased citizens are so large, that they ought to be taxed. I know it's a very unpopular view, but when you read of billions of shillings in estates, and we could put a limit, we could say we start with 20 billion, we would still be, that would still be many estates, and there's a way of raising funding that way. I know it is not popular, and I will say no more about it. My learned friend and Honorable Omogeni, I don't think I would consider the Mozambique model a successful model. Every time you allow a person to be the appointing authority in respect of a commission that would determine his own fate as a politician, I think you create a temptation. And I want to remind my friend, the Honorable Mugeni, in the beginning at independence, we didn't even have, there was no electoral commission. You remember there was a man called Montgomery. Montgomery was an officer in the AG's office. He was answerable to Charles Jonjo. So Charles Jonjo conducted the elections through Montgomery. Then when Montgomery left, a gentleman, I think from the highlands, called Nyarango. Yeah, Nyarango. Exactly. He became the commissioner of elections, and life went on. The clamor to create a commission came because the capriciousness of that process under one person answering to the Attorney General became apparent. So the commission was institutionalized to deal with that. So I would not like politicians to have a direct say on who becomes the umpire, the referee of the competition in which they are participating. Now, then you ask me, and I don't have the right answer. So what do you want us to do? Ask Price Waterhouse to do it, or a consulting firm to do it? I'm not sure that is also correct. I think the way we are doing it, the model we have, conceptually is the correct model. To build into it safety valves is the challenge, and I don't have the answer. I think I seem to have, no. Oh, this would be terrible if I didn't deal with the ladies, Honorable Bilianga's comments. Let me assure you, I have saved the best for last. If we increase the number of constituencies, Now, and we go back to our conundrum. If we increased Parliament to 500 members, we will double expenditure, and we will need to tax more, and our basic problem then will be multiplied. I think what we should do is to reduce the number of seats, and then guarantee women 50% of those seats. That is less problematic. And I don't want to say anything about Parliament. About the Senate. I think the Senate is of a reasonable size. I think the Senate is of a reasonable size. And this problem, if we call it the problem of the gender problem, you can see how problematic it can be when you look at the counties. Because then down there, the top up to achieve the required proportions can result in a really bloated assembly. So I would like to stop there, Mr. Chairman.
We have to thank you for those observations. And you know, Prof, I came in the tail end of your presentation, so I now must moderate my compliments, if you allow me.
Yes.
Because I may not necessarily agree with everything you've said, particularly on the issue of taxation. That's why I referred you to Article 201 and fair taxation. Today, our policemen are actually having a negative payslip. On the one hand, something was added to them, and then the take-away package is minus. I don't even know if we are now taking them to Haiti, what the whole thing would mean. And of course, on Haiti, I would opine that these things should really first go to Parliament. That I think is how ideally should be. That's not for our discussion. But you know, you were on record. I hope you pronounce yourself on that, Prof. That during the last presidential election, were you amicus or you actually on one side? That would have been very important, because coming out strongly as you do on the outcome, the pronounced outcome by the highest court in the land, and the subsequent clamor for these things, including what Omgen was saying, really, I think it's important. Now, Mozambique, as we all know, was basically a country that went through serious struggle. And even now it is actually under threat of religious insurgency in the north. And you know the main players, Frelimo and Renamo, the political reality at the time meant that the leaders of those two political formations, a country coming out of conflict, and this country actually had to help Mozambique specifically in some of those areas. You may remember the role of Bethel Kiplagat, the late Bethel Kiplagat played in trying to assist the people of Mozambique. To opine is what you're calling mitigated disaster of IPPG is what actually delivered, because when you have two strong appointing authorities and they're sitting at the level of a commission, then clearly the balance of terror, if you like, is what will deliver results, and that's what happened in 2002. I don't think we need to belabor the point, but we hear you, and I personally have the highest of esteem for you, Prof, and continue being close. If you can add your reflections and give us something in writing, it will be very useful for us.
I'll
Thank
try
you.
to do that, and thank you.
You send by email?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. I think Amnesty International is the next group.
Good to see you, Amnesty International. Wanairungo and team, I think that my co-chair has just slipped out. But karibuni sana.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, so perhaps we could begin with some quick introductions. I'm sure you by now know a lot of these committee members. We have to, nearer you, there, Senator Omugeni, Senator of Nyamira, and a committee member, and Honorable Eugene Wamalwa is a party leader and a committee member. Honorable Wandai is a committee member and deputy minority leader in Parliament, in the National Assembly. Our sister Catherine Obilianga is a member of this committee and countryman rep from doing it a second term. She's doing her second term, so fairly senior in party organization and also in Parliament. So the other members who will be coming, we took a decision that during these stakeholder consultations, we don't have to strictly apply the our own rules with regard to quorum. So I think you should continue in the interest of time, and therefore over to you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Dr. Kalonzo Musyoka. I am Irungo Houghton. I serve as Amnesty International Kenya's Executive Director, and with me on my left is Ramadan Rajab, Senior Campaign Officer on issues of civic freedoms and civil liberties. And on my right is our researcher, our country researcher, Benta Mwege. We start by really extending our best wishes to this process, to the committee, and also our gratitude for the opportunity to come before you and to speak on a singular issue, noting that there may be many issues that we could engage you on. To the members of the committee, allow us to just frame who you are for us, which essentially is the custodians of the Constitution at this time. Much of the discussions that you will have leave us with no doubt that on your shoulders lie several of our constitutional freedoms and the fundamental rights that are in our Constitution. And your wisdom at a time like this can actually take the country several steps forward or plunge us back to the chaos that we saw in the earlier part of the year. Allow me to address a single issue, which is security sector reform and policing. As you no doubt aware, you had with as far back as the post-election violence, the issue of security sector reform, peace and stability has been a troubled culture for us for many years. With the 2010 Constitution, we saw a massive step forward in terms of the separation of investigations, prosecution, and judicial processes. We also saw the establishment of an independent policing service, and that service was pronounced as a service and not as a police force that came to our shores as a colonial occupying institution several years before that. We will address ourselves to the issues that we have shared in our memo of September the 7th, and I do hope that members of the committee have got them. The press has sensationalized the budget for this committee, so we have brought extra copies for the committee just in case those sensational allegations are true. So I'll invite Benta if you can just circulate the documentation that forms the basis of our intervention this morning. It is opportune, perhaps, that we are now looking at the issue of our police service being exported to Haiti and the issue of the quality of the policing.
You must have heard me, Mr. Irungu, before you. So continue, please continue.
Okay, sorry.
Just ignore the chair's intervention and proceed.
The possibility of 1,000 police officers traveling to Haiti within a few months brings the presentation that we're about to make into, I think, an important moment. That we should be discussing the quality of our policing and the accountability of the policing at a time like this is critical. As those officers go to Haiti, the international world, the international attention will be on Kenyan police officers. We also, as Amnesty, would caution that they are going into a very volatile situation, and that as much as we are concerned about the quality of policing at this point, it is also important that we note that they need to be kept safe. So it is in that context that we will make the following points and recommendations. It is sad in some ways that the contingent of police were not being deployed in 2022, because in that year, we saw what was probably the best example of what it is like to have a police service that can maintain law and order during elections. With a number of human rights organizations, tens of dialogues and workshops were developed between community leaders, human rights defenders, and police officers, including commanding officers throughout the country, to ensure that there would be dialogue and that there would be community policing approach to the electoral process. And as we all know, it was probably one of the most peaceful of the elections. The question we have to ask ourselves is why 1 year later have we seen such violence, such brutality, and such a level of denialism on the part of the security services and, to some extent, Harambee House. We, as Amnesty International, with several agencies, including Human Rights Watch, the Kenya Medical Association, the Law Society of Kenya, conducted 3 empirical missions to investigate the quality of policing during the phase that we now call Mandamano. And I would like to just give you a couple of the findings from those 2 reports. The first report was released on May the 31st, and essentially was a statement following interviews with about 115 witnesses and victims in that period, March to April. The second second report was done and released to the country on August the 4th, and this was a more in-depth study that essentially looked at what had happened in Kisumu and Migori primarily, but also in some of the other areas. These 2 reports are before you as the committee, and what we found in the 2 reports was that 5 fundamental constitutional freedoms were violated over the last 6 months. The first is the right to life, Article 26 of the Constitution, Article 37 of the Constitution, the right to peaceful assembly, Article 36 of the Constitution, the right to association, and Article 33 of the Constitution, the freedom of expression, and lastly, the right to a fair trial. 60 days after the first round of protest, that was in March, based on our interviews with 115 witnesses, we found that there had been excessive and unnecessary use of force, particularly lethal force, leading to the deaths of over 12 verified individuals. Most of the people who were killed were bystanders. They claimed not to be part of the demonstrations, and they were unarmed. Most of them were young, between the ages of 20 and 30, and most of them, at least half of them, had died as a result of gunshot wounds. We listened to the testimony of the mother of Precious Kimunto, a 4-month-old Kibera infant who was tear gassed in her home and suffocated to death on March the 30th. Many of us watched in horror as tear gas was thrown into schools, leading to an entire school being evacuated, an entire class being evacuated and taken to hospital because they had inhaled tear gas of substances that we, as far as we know, we do not have a sense of how safe they were to use on minors. Towards the end of July, we traveled to Migori and to Kisumu. We spoke to county government officials. We spoke to police officers, prosecutors. We spoke also to medical doctors, journalists, survivors, and families of victims. And we heard that there had been 107 cases of assault. Many of those cases, again, 47 of them were cases that had seen gunshot wounds, and in many cases, these gunshot wounds had left people either very seriously injured or dead. We, with our own eyes, verified the deaths of 11 individuals at the referral hospital. Most of them were male, and most of them were between the ages of 17 and 38. We listened to medical practitioners, doctors, who said that police officers chased protesters and bystanders into the referral hospital and threw tear gas into the hospital, leading to tear gas going into the hospital wards. We had journalists who were unable to cover the stories because they were being attacked either by police officers or by protesters. We had medical doctors and medical health practitioners who could not reach places of medical facilities because they could not access and get through the violence that took place. In many ways, the experience we have had over the last 6 months are probably the worst violence we have seen for several years, possibly since 2017. Therefore, we have a number of recommendations, 5 to be specific. The first is that in the spirit of the bipartisan committee that has been set up to lay rest the denialism that we have seen most sensationally by the Inspector General, that bodies had been imported into the referral hospital, into the mortuary for the purposes of the media. We would require you, humbly ask you to essentially do joint fact-finding missions to places like Nyanza, places like Nairobi and Mombasa. And we as Amnesty, with the Missing Voices Alliance and other organizations, would be very happy to facilitate, to organize those trips so that you are able to very quickly determine independently what actually happened over this period. The second recommendation is that you require the Inspector General of the National Police Service as the lead commander of our 100,000 officers and the lead commander of the troops that will go to Haiti and will be covered on national and international television. I think we have to brace ourselves for seeing Kenyan police officers on CNN, on Voice of America, and various other international media to come before the committee. And we would request the following line of inquiry. The first is that the IG commits to not shield his officers from legal processes that would have the officers responsible for the violence that we saw over the last 6 months be brought before a court of law. Secondly, that there be a commitment to desist from the use of non-uniformed officers. And in fact, as Amnesty, we have tried to get, I guess, a response from the police service on what is the policy with regards to informers and undercover police officers in times of protest and in moments when Kenyans are lawfully seeking to protest and to assemble. One of the things we were told by several journalists and medical officers was that the use of non-uniformed police officers and the embedding of police officers among journalists, among protesters, and even among medical practitioners. If you remember the viral clip of police officers climbing out of an ambulance, is that it put our doctors, our nurses, and our journalists in harm's way. The third line of inquiry is essentially that schools, places of learning, medical centers have to be off limits to police officers. I'm sure there will be agreement from the Kenya Medical Association, from the Kenya National Union of Teachers, from the head teachers associations, that in a time when there is tension and there is violence, police officers should not be entering our schools and our medical centers with live ammunition and batons and tear gas. And the last one essentially is that we must have safe passage for emergency health workers and journalists at times when there is turmoil. The third recommendation relates to the two principal actors that are responsible for investigations and prosecutions. We would ask the committee to request of the Independent Policing Oversight Authority to clarify how many of the 107 cases that were documented in July have actually moved to prosecution. How many of the cases that involve the lethal use of force and the death of both civilians and police officers, how many of those cases have been taken to a court of law? And I think on the second part, obviously the preserve of the prosecution arm of our government is the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. Fourthly, and I'm coming to the last recommendation, that the Ministry of Interior be requested to explain why do we still have a delay of 5 years since the National Assembly passed the Prevention of Torture Act and the National Coroner Service Act, and why aren't those two laws being implemented with the alacrity that is required in order to keep Kenyans safe? It may be opportune at this point, particularly in terms of the last 6 months, and in terms of our officers going abroad to protect Haitians, for a national police conference to be organized. There have been several of these in the past. Under the previous administration, one of the important open door policies that they had was essentially accessibility. And I can speak with confidence and experience that I was able to get through to the cabinet secretary, to the principal secretary, to various arms of the interior ministry with the capacity that we would be listened to, and not always did they act on our recommendations or our advice, but at least we had access. We were also able to make memoranda to the policing conference, and some of the reforms that have come with regards to the condition of police officers has really come as a result of the interventions of Amnesty and several other organizations like IMLU, like Haki Africa and others. So it is a time like this that we need policy dialogue on this issue. Let me turn to the last issue, which is somewhat out of the realm of the policing environment that we have had up to now, but is extremely important. The incidences of enforced disappearances are returning. The use of special squads are beginning to lead us to concern that we are going to start seeing more people disappearing under this administration. His Excellency, the President, gave a public assurance to this nation that his government would not be a government of the shadows. It would not be a government that would not remain within the rule of law. And I think one of the concerns that we have is that we are starting to see a return to the kind of situation we saw in Yala. Allow me to bring up one incident just to illustrate how dangerous this is. 3 months before the elections, 2 Indian contractors disappeared with a Kenyan driver. They were members of the campaign team for the Kenya Kwanza campaign, and those 2 contractors disappeared into the thick of the night. They were captured on CCTV camera, we know this. Police officers have been able to track down the actual police officers that stopped their vehicle. And up to now, that case has not progressed. Why? Because we have a lacuna in our law, which says that if you cannot find the bodies of people who have disappeared, then that legal process is almost in jeopardy from the onset. I think the Kenya Kwanza national government requires itself to find a way, not just in the memory of those 2 Indian contractors, but in the spirit and in the protection of all people who have disappeared, all the families of the people who have disappeared, to find a legal framework that ensures that enforced disappearances are not a part of our national culture. I would like to stop there, knowing that the committee may have questions or comments. And as always, as Amnesty, we come in good faith, based on evidence, and with a hope to find a bridge between what offends our constitution and the way forward. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies.
Well, we thank you, Bwana Irungu, for clarity of presentation and thought, and the concerns you have as Amnesty, which indeed are concerns shared by a lot of Kenyans who would want to have a peaceful country. I hope you'll be able to we propose that you take the comments that colleagues here may want to put across to you, and then you can respond at the end of those comments or questions. The first one is this Haiti thing. It's not within our province as such, but a matter like this, I think, will require approval of the UN Security Council. And when I saw President Biden addressing the session at General Assembly, he was saying that should be expedited. I don't know whether anybody will know, I have not since followed, whether UN Security Council approval has been given. And the other point I say, the matter, an assignment as grave as this would need, I think, approval of a National Assembly and the Senate. I think it is in our law. But, you know, the work of Amnesty International is very well known, and you have, Mr. Rungu, been vocal. I've watched you on national television, and I wish that we could have Kenyans of strong conscience as Amnesty and you, Mr. Rungo, on this, calling it as it is. We are a little shy as a committee because we're trying to promote national dialogue and conversations. The very weighty matter of police brutality, excessive use of force, use of live bullets. I think I must have been on record as saying this goes beyond the work of this committee. But having said that, I can be overruled if colleagues indeed, and I thank you for volunteering even to support a fact-finding mission to establish further truth. EPOA were here yesterday, and they did, I think, say quite a bit, a lot of which is even in the print media today. So, friends, karibuni, let's hear what comments we may have. I think the first to go is Eugene, Honorable Eugene, and then a human rights crusader who sometimes gets confused. Light note, Hassan Omar.
Thank you very much, Nairum, with your team. And we want to thank you also for the good work that you are doing. Human rights are universal, and we believe, given one of the most progressive constitutions that we have in this country, we wanted to see our police transformed from a police force to a police service. And our constitution is very clear in terms of professionalism, in terms of respect for human rights and integrity of our officers. But what happened in this country after the elections, the levels of police brutality is very worrying. Some of us on this table are victims of police brutality during these protests. And our constitution under Article 37 gives every Kenyan the right to demonstrate, to picket, unarmed and peacefully to do so. But we have a situation where the police is actually criminalizing protests. It's a very worrying situation where you are told, oh, today we'll allow you to picket or demonstrate here in Nairobi. Tomorrow we'll not allow you in Kisumu, we'll not allow you. They would allow in Eldred. I gave the example of the Finland scandal, where parents came out, they were allowed to protest. In Kericho, we had these tea picking machines. Farmers were allowed to protest. But here in Nairobi, the police brutality was serious. I'm looking at your report, and you are giving figures. I think you've talked of 94. You've also talked of 44. When IPOA was before us, they talked of 57 killed by the police. And some were killed by bludgeoning, where the police broke into estates, pulled out people from their houses, and bludgeoned them to death. I buried two of the Nyalenda brothers, Brian and William, very young boys. And it was a very, very sad story. You've referred us to Precious Kemunto, a little baby with a mother in her home, where police break in and throw tear gas in residential areas. And the poor baby suffocated to death. But the majority of the deaths, from what we witnessed, were actually from police bullets. Most of those killed were young fellows, 18 to 30. The bullet wounds, when we looked at the postmortem reports, the death certificates, were from bullets from behind, in the back. Some were shot in the head, running away from the police. Our laws require use of firearms in the prescribed way, where the police are either threatened or they are saving lives. But in the case of where police shoot innocent citizens who are unarmed, I think it's a very worrying thing, and we wanted to know from you in terms of what His Excellency Kalonzo has said. There is this concern, not just nationally, but internationally, of the Kenyan police, who have this year shown very serious disregard for human rights, going outside our borders, 1,000 of them going to Haiti. Of course, it's a matter that we are hoping our parliamentarians will take up so that it is properly debated, whether we should be a country sending our young men in harm's way with zones. And these are some of the things that we are looking at in terms of reforms. IPOA had very specific, apart from your recommendations, shielding of officers who have misused their firearms to take innocent lives. These firearms, the ballistics, being handled through the forensic lab that is under the DCI, and the DCI is part of the National Police Service. They are proposing an independent institution to handle that so that evidence is not compromised. The police do not protect their own. Because there's a Ugandan saying that a monkey cannot decide the affairs of the forest. It's very likely that the police can protect each other. So that many cases are compromised and the police have not been held to account for the brutality they have committed. I don't know what you think about those recommendations, apart from your 5 recommendations that you've given. Thank you.
Hassan.
Just as a note, as we oppose the deployment of our police service into Haiti, I'll ask us ourselves as politicians and members to be very careful to not to set the ground for very hostile reception. Because what we have been doing, some of us here, is to link the abuses we allege here as probably the conduct of these police officers on arrival at Haiti. We are carelessly putting them into harm's way. Once our men and women in uniform are out of this country, whether we agree with the process or not, the least we owe them is some levels of discipline in how we refer to them, so that as we debate the issues, provide for their security, provide for their training, or oppose the issues, I think we must not equate our political biases into putting them into harm's way. So we must be very restrained, because I'm seeing a situation, if some of these utterances, which have come from this committee severally, go viral, I'm told some of those groups are armed. You could be preparing for a very unnecessary contest. It's not going to be a blind mission. I'm not at liberty also to discuss it, but it's not going to be a blind mission. It's going to be done in a manner that the safety and security of our officers will be guaranteed. The government of Kenya is not led by fools. They will make it appear like we will just take 1,000 men and women and just put them there for sacrifice. Number 2, I never speak this way, but sometimes I would hope for you also to interrogate some of these demonstrations in a manner, because today I'm talking to peers in the human rights fraternity. They know that I wrote the Charter on Human Rights in the lead up to our elections. We said our first pillar is implementation of the Constitution. And you saw the directives of the president upon election as president of the Republic of Kenya. How is it possible, and be fair, that a demonstration or demonstrators are carrying weapons? Not necessarily ballistic weapons like guns, but they are carrying stones and machetes. These guys prepare themselves. I was there. I know what these demos are. I planned them. I know what we tell each other. Go burn these tires here. Sijui mtu fulani ndo ataongoza pale, yule ataongoza pale. And half the time there's a confrontation between the police. Yes, maybe sometimes the force used is disproportionate, but even where these demonstrations have been left to go on, we have seen even the time when they said, let them demonstrate. Shops have been looted, infrastructure has been vandalized. We need to have a real conversation about these issues. And then tell our friends when they go to a demonstration, you cannot use constitutional means to achieve unconstitutional objectives. But purporting to take oath that this is the time for a revolution under the guise of Article 37 is not the intent of Article 37. Number three, the Constitution has more than one Article 37. It has the sovereign rights. It has other articles of the Constitution, the right to vote, the respect for institutions of the state, including the Supreme Court when it speaks itself. I was very surprised. One of the civil society organizations which monitored the elections told me, hey, this election was free and fair. You guys actually beat this other team. A few months later, he tells me, oh, you know, if there's an allegation by one party, then it needs to be dispensed of. And I'm thinking to myself, on what basis? So even, I'm not saying even the neutrality of civil society in terms of how it anchors itself in the new discourse, will speak very much to how civil society is then able to navigate the new terrain. Gone are the days when you'll just go to an international community actor and tell them the UDA government or the Kenya Kwanza government is a dictator government. These are men and women. We also engage. Those representatives also have the intelligence agencies. They also have the information. I've come to realize actually the reason sometimes government is always on the back foot is because when you're in government, always you are expected to talk less. And even what you have, you reveal as a very measured way. But I can tell you, if you go and get part of the documentation and some of the information that even our counterparts have, that's why sometimes you see their responses are measured. There was a time they will say in no uncertain terms that this was wrong. But they understand the design to try and precipitate a crisis so that you divert the country's attention from the economics and try to brand the KK government as a dictatorship. That is not true. And I think those are the kind of things that as we prosecute in the new discourse, you have friends in this government, they engage at various levels. And I can tell you without a doubt, sometimes we even ask very hard questions internally. I am not sure whether that evidence is some of it, the credibility to it, but I'll finalize by one thing, and Rajab there can bear me witness. We were defending some terrorism suspects. Unfortunately, these terrorism suspects were arrested alongside one of the human rights defenders. When they were in custody, the revelations they made, when this man was released, he told us some of the things are actually true. How they would transport ballistic missiles, how they would organize, how they would get, you remember those testimonies, how they would get firearms from our neighbors. And when Kamwende told us, we just didn't believe him because we thought it was Kamwende. So Kamwende is lying to us. He is concocting stories. But trust me, at many of these scenes and some of these organizational frameworks for this latest wave of demonstrations, why are people talking about burning tires and carrying this and these guys to barricade these ones and these ones to stone cars that are going to work? And this information sometimes is available to the security agencies. And they also have a DTP, the duty to protect other Kenyans. I do agree where there is excessive use of force, where there is unjustified executions, then those have to be dealt with within the purview of law. But talk to our friends that demonstrations cannot achieve the ends that the elections cannot achieve.
Thank you, Omar. I think we'll hear one day. Did you want to say something, Kocha?
You can go first.
Yes, let me say this and start from where my friend Omar has left.
demonstrations, of course, are a way of expressing oneself and properly guaranteed under the Constitution and enabling laws. There's no doubt, really, regardless of the objective. But let me ask you, in your investigations, and I want to agree with you, because actually what you said here corroborates to a very large extent the testimony of a government agency, IPOA, which were before us here yesterday, and they were seated there. Your evidence corroborates their testimony to a very large extent. But let me ask you, because we need to remain as objective as possible. In your investigations, did you come across evidence that the police killings, which have been documented, were a reaction to threats posed by the demonstrators, either the police themselves or any other citizens? Okay? And even in those circumstances, was the use of lethal force, including live bullets, justified? I want to ask another question, and very, very briefly. In your research, I'm sure you do research a lot, and you do in comparable jurisdictions. Under what circumstances can the police service deploy persons who are not uniformed and carrying military-style guns, actually assault rifles, not uniformed, carrying assault rifles, not wearing any protective gear, okay, to face demonstrators or a mob or a rioting mob? What would be the intention of such deployment if not to kill the mob? I hope you get me. That you are not uniformed, which means nobody can recognize you as a police officer. You are not having any protective gear, which means don't fear. You are not scared of any possible assault. And you are deployed into a crowd, which is charged. Okay? Finally, is, and I posed this question yesterday to IPOA, and they agreed that indeed it is possible for a private entity or person to undertake private prosecution. And this is clear, it's implicit under Article 157 of the Constitution. 157(6), the director of the DPP, rather, shall exercise state powers of prosecution and may, among other things, at B, take over and continue any criminal proceedings commenced in any court that have been instituted or undertaken by another person or authority, and so on and so forth. Of course, this implies that another person or authority other than the DPP can institute private prosecution. Because the case we faced yesterday was that the IPOA has forwarded numerous files against specific police officers whom they accuse of killing Kenyans during demonstrations, and yet those files are still lying at the DPP. Nobody knows what became of them, and nobody for sure knows when they shall ever be released or be acted upon. Is it possible that Amnesty International and related organizations or persons can exercise the right under the Constitution and the law to institute private prosecution against these culpable police officers? Thank you. I'll stop it at that.
Maybe just to say something, my name is Catherine. The demonstrators, as much as they have the right to demonstrate, let them keep off from school zones and know that the children have their right. That's what I wanted to say.
Yes.
Just the demonstrators or the police, because police also tear gassed innocent kids in school, in Westlands actually.
That's a very valid point.
It was
If we
very,
are
very
saying,
specific.
let us keep
The demonstrators.
police off school areas, demonstrators also must keep off school areas.
Thank you,
And even
Bwana
residential
Irungu
areas.
Houghton with your Amnesty International, and we thank you for the good work you're doing. At times, I like us to speak for posterity, because Hassan Omar was chair of Human Rights Commission. At the same time, I was chair of LSK. And when you speak for human rights, it's always good to speak that you would be on this other side. And I remember one time Ahmed Nasir told us, as a Muslim, Islam dislikes people are dishonest, people are deceptive, people who tell lies. They like honest. So I'm sure all of us here want to have an honest discourse. The point I've picked, which I think is a problem, you have said that there's a problem in prosecuting police officers who engage in police brutality and in violence against innocent people, including, I hope, these two innocent kids who were killed in the hands of police. And we need to get a solution, because we need accountability. What we are discussing here is about governance. We need accountability. Now that it seems the police will always be out there to shield their own, would you maybe propose that we need to look for another different legal mechanism? Because it seems from the report you have given us, it seems the police will never prosecute their own. And that's what Ipoa told us yesterday. In the US, they have what they call an independent counsel. If you want to prosecute somebody in Congress, you will get an independent counsel. The Attorney General will propose, the High Court will confirm the appointment, then an independent counsel will go and investigate maybe a congressperson or a sitting president or somebody high level in government. Knowing that, today that side will be in government, tomorrow they may not. In Zambia, you saw what Lungu did to Echilemi Akainde. This week, Echilemi Akainde is telling Lungu, these jokes you do on Saturday, that is politics, I'll come after you. This keep changing. Now Echilemi Akainde is telling Lungu, don't joke. In last elections, supporters of Echilemi Akainde were tear gassed. One guy was shot outside a police station. So we want to do this for posterity. Would you support a proposal that we create an office of independent counsel, so that if there is an allegation, even today it could be me, tomorrow it could be Honorable Mbarire, of police brutality, we don't leave it to be in the hands of the police, but we get somebody independent to do the investigation and prosecution, so that we bring an end to what you call impunity within the police force. I just wanted to get your take on that particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Maybe, Mr. Irungu, let me begin by associating myself largely with the sentiments of Senator Omar regarding the deployment of officers in Haiti, because that's a matter that's really not in the realm of this committee, and we need to exercise caution, as Senator Omar said, so that we don't put our men and women in uniform in harm's way wherever they serve us, because they are all our children, they are Kenyans like ourselves, and we owe them that duty of care in whatever we say. But you appreciate, Houston, there is also a very thin line between protecting the rights of demonstrators. And in that case, demonstrators who are not doing so peaceably and unarmed, as is stipulated in our constitution and our laws. And also the duty by policemen to protect life and property of those who are not otherwise involved in violent protests. I want to believe part of the reason we are here as a dialogue committee, as His Excellency keeps reminding us, is so that we are able to dialogue as a country, to put behind our nation the culture of violence, and where we settle political disagreements using violence. And from where you sit as human rights crusaders and activists, you then owe the country a duty of civic education. That, and I have seen players in the civil society demonstrate over the cost of living peaceably and unarmed, not with machetes, not with stones, and they do so, and the police actually escort them, even to the gates of parliament. I have seen them even chain themselves to the gates of parliament peaceably. I don't know what your role would be as a civil society players and more so human rights activists to protect the rights of even officers and other Kenyans who are not involved in the violence. And probably also engage Kenyans in a crusade of civic education where you educate Kenyans that a demonstration, a procession, a protest, picketing does not necessarily mean a campaign of violence and anarchy. Because when we get into a campaign of violence and anarchy, then you leave the police in a catch-22 position where police officers have to protect another Kenyan's supermarket being looted, and the people looting have machetes, are armed with stones, they have broken into a supermarket, you lobby tear gas, they do not respond, they continue looting and threaten the police. Therefore, there has to be that balance, and we must appreciate that balance. Two, nobody in this country would advocate for excessive use of force, because as Senator Mugeni says, today it's Opio and I, tomorrow it's me. And trust me, I have been there, I know. Those two young Indians you refer to and their taxi driver are people I knew, are people I worked with. There was no reason, absolutely no reason for those young Indians and the Kenyans who were killed by the people, as you say, who are known. Therefore, as we speak about Kenyans who were killed in the demonstrations, let us not forget those Kenyans who were executed in the name of politics. Those young Indians were executed in the name of politics for no reason at all. And not just those because they were Kenya Kwanza. There are many Kenyans. And Irungu, you remember the bodies that were fished out of Rivayala simply because of their political beliefs. People we knew. Therefore, as we speak, and I speak this with a very heavy heart because we lost so many people that worked with us in the last campaign because of what they believed in politically. And we had their bodies in Rivayala, some in River Tana, others in the Abadeas. Those young Indians, you have rightly said, the officers are not, but they cannot be prosecuted because the bodies have never been found. But therein brings me to my question, Mr. Irungu and your colleagues in the human rights world. Tomorrow, and Omar Hassan also did point out to the incident where they were advocating for the rights of people who are being accused of financing or engaging in terrorism. And you have a duty to defend their rights. Tomorrow, I am almost certain if those officers were charged in court, of course, the lawyers in the room will rush to represent them. But also human rights crusaders will be there speaking about their rights, knowing very well that these are the people who participated in these extrajudicial killings. You've also spoken about the right of passage, and I agree with you wholly. The right of passage, especially of medical personnel, of journalists when during demonstrations. You've spoken about the police lobbing tear gas in schools, in hospitals, but you're also aware there were incidents where youth again were getting tear gas canisters lobbed at them to disperse them. They get hold of the tear gas canisters and hurl them back in private institutions, in schools, in hospitals, to create a situation of anarchy. Therefore, maybe I don't know what you would do, and I have no solution myself as to what you would do as human rights crusaders to ensure that when people claim to be peaceably and unarmed to be demonstrating, then they also do so in designated places. Your rights end where mine begin. It is so said. Why would anyone stop another Kenyan from going to work because they want to protest? Why don't we have a country where we are decent, where we are civilized, that if we're having a demonstration on the cost of living, we do not have to pull down the entire infrastructure on the expressway in the name of protesting, that we can peaceably and unarmed gather at a designated point, protest, and say all the manner of things we want to say against whoever we want to say against, then peaceably go home in the evening. And I don't know, I have no solution. It's just probably more of comments. I don't know if there's anyone else with something else before we close. Maybe if not, we can close at that, and Nerungu can answer those ones.
Thank you very much. And I now know why I was looking forward to this engagement, because the questions have been clear and direct, and I thank you all for the frankness and the courteous way that you have responded to our presentation. The points that have been raised fall into 7. Allow me just to quickly deal with them. Haiti, and I will exercise I guess I will exercise a bit of judiciousness in terms of response based on Honorable Hassan's comment. The issue of data and verifiable data. Thirdly, the issue of policing approaches during assembly, private prosecution, legal reform, civic education, and criminalizing disappearances. And I'll try and be propositional on all of those issues. Allow me, first of all, just say, Your Excellency, thank you for the kind words at the beginning. May God and government keep me safe, keep Amnesty safe, keep all human rights organizations safe, and indeed all of you and 50 million Kenyans. I mean, that is the spirit, I think, that our constitution is drafted. On the issue of Haiti, and it is a weighty matter, allow me just to say 2 or 3 things as the process begins to unfold. And of course, one is the UN Security Council, and the second is our own very own National Assembly. As Amnesty International, we believe that there has to be clear and mandatory enforceable parameters for the mission. What those will take is obviously a matter of experts. We need to make sure that there will be no excessive force, there will be no corruption, and secondly, there will be no sexist exploitation. The people of Haiti have, as we know, suffered too much. They demand they require a human rights-based policing mission. And I believe that with these procedures, these parameters, and as Amnesty, we can offer any of the authorities ideas on this within a UN framework, it can be done. The second recommendation on Haiti is that there has to be a UN oversight mechanism that ensures that Haitians have access to issues of accountability, to access to justice and redress where there may be excesses. And I think this would be very important. We would also say, given our own experience, that we would require we would invite the National Assembly to ensure and require that all commanders, not just the topmost commander, of whom we have respect as Amnesty International, that all commanders are assessed on the basis of their ability to de-escalate situations. Let me turn to the second part of the second question, which relates to the data. There will be some difference in data, Honorable Omugeni. I think it is very difficult, as many people know, to be able to have one verified source on a moment as intense as the demonstrations that we had. Our data is verified. We can say behind every one of those statistics that we have verified those numbers, and indeed I believe the IPOA, who came before you yesterday, could probably do the same thing. We would probably, I guess, respond to some of the questions that are raised around the what broke down in terms of policing over this period. And it is gratifying, I guess, for the co-chair, Honorable Kimani, who says that nobody will challenge the constitutional principle. Allow us to also say that we respect the uniform. We respect the oath of office that police undertake, and most of the 100,000 police officers are not going to be held liable for the violence that we saw over the last 6 months. But I think there are a number of things we need to point out. On the basis of our own research, what we realized is that the crisis started at the point that the police refused to accept notifications, that they began to intimidate and arrest organizers, and wherever protesters gathered non-violently, they dispersed them with tear gas, rubber bullets, and as the months continued, live weapons. There was a point, I don't know if you recall, in July, when it was actually very difficult to be able to distinguish between bystanders, marshals, protest organizers, uniformed police officers, non-uniformed police officers using military-grade weaponry, looters, criminals. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, based on that experience and in the knowledge that we are a troubled nation economically, and that even if the political class can find a way of setting aside the differences and setting aside the grievances from the past, we are still a troubled nation. There will still be protests and demonstrations. So this is why we say, as Amnesty, it is important that we have a serious national policy review of how we police assemblies. And our recommendation is essentially a national policing conference. And it has helped break through a number of problems that we've seen. Allow me to turn to the recommendation or the suggestion, and I smiled a little bit as the presentations went on, because we thought we were coming to task the committee, but we have received a few tasks on our side, which we gladly pick up. The first is that the Constitution is innocent. The Constitution is the one instrument or the one person that will not be dragged through a court of law as a result of the violence that we've seen in the last 6 months. We would probably argue that the laws are also innocent, with the exception of possibly one, because we feel that the National Coroner Service Act, which was passed by the National Assembly 5 years ago, gives us the capacity for an independent forensic capacity, for legal capacity, for a operational capacity to hold police officers accountable, to be able to independently assess crimes committed by uniformed officers. And therefore, we probably would not, at this stage, but again, perhaps I can speak with the former Law Society of Kenya chairperson to see how this independent tribunal might be constructed. We would simply say that you have the laws in place. Can we implement them? I think the second area really is to reflect a little bit on the Public Order Act. And I think this is the one area where Honorable Hassan will probably also agree with us, in addition to the other things that he has said this morning, which is we have an archaic Public Order Act. It is so far behind the Constitution that it is out of focus. We would call for its immediate repeal and replacement with clarity, clear legal provisions that do not offend or criminalize protesters, but keep protests lawful and non-violent. And I think, Honorable Kimani, let me just turn to your point, which I think is really important. You know, we spoke to a number of prosecutors and police officers, and many of them requested anonymity, which was a matter of concern for me, because in many ways what we are discussing are national issues. They should be matters that we can debate and take responsibility for our comments. But one of the things that, you know, we came away from those conversations was that there is a difference between protesters who destroy property, who assault others, who rape and sexually molest others during these moments of turmoil, and protesters. And the problem is that we are not able, and I say we, I mean, I think as an ecosystem, we're not able to distinguish between those categories that I read out earlier. The bystander, the marshal, the uniformed officer, the looter, the criminal, the protester, and the non-uniformed military officer that is not carrying any identification, but is carrying military-grade weapons. And I think what we have to do is we have to begin to distinguish that much more clearly. None of the policing that we saw during this period that we documented had the capacity to distinguish this. In fact, it was almost blurred to a point that we began to think it was deliberate. Because if notifications had been given to protesters from the political parties, if the protesters had been facilitated, given assurance, there had been clarity in terms of the routes of the demonstrations, and there had been recourse when criminals come to hijack those protests, I have a feeling that we would not have de-escalated or rather spiraled in the way that we did. And therefore, I think there is an opportunity going forward, now that our heads are clearer and the violence has hopefully is behind us, for us to be able to do this. Let me lastly turn, I think, to the point that's been raised in terms of civic education and private prosecution. 80% of Amnesty's work is civic education. We spend a lot of time in our schools with young people. We spend a lot of time with families that have, have experienced human rights violations. And to be honest, that is the best part of our work. It actually pains me to come before the nation with those statements, those press conferences, even to discuss like this, the ugliness that our country is capable of. So I would really look forward to the committee looking at this issue of civic education. For the record, we pushed very hard just before the last elections with the Jubilee administration. And the Jubilee administration, through a note verbal, banned funding by the donor community to the IEBC or to civic organizations to do civic election work. And we said that the most dangerous thing is an election where you have high levels of disinformation, misinformation, a lack of regulation of social media platforms, and algorithms that nobody understands how they work, except the people who pay for them. As we move into a season of artificial intelligence, I know I'm moving slightly far. I think we have to look at the quality of civic education that is available for our people. We are in the moment of a moral hysteria around LGBTIQ persons. Allow me to go there also. There are individuals and constituencies that are deliberately trying to whip up homophobic and hateful comment against people that have committed no law and have not been taken to a court of law. But they would rather that they are beaten, that they are stripped, that they are taken from their homes and their jobs. But let me not stop there for those of you who haven't got quite to the position of care and compassion. We have to think about that baby, that 3-year-old child called Brighton Sagini. And it still burns me, that story. How does a 3-year-old be killed by 3 generations of her family? A grandmother, an uncle, and a cousin. 3 generations conspired to kill a child 15 years before that child had any opportunity to inherit that land. Or perhaps we can go to Shakahola and discuss how is it possible that close to 500 people could have been persuaded by one very charismatic evangelist to kill themselves through starvation. Allow me just to end on a sober note. Our country is ailing, and we must provide the leadership at this time for the country to become respectful of diversity, to be anti-discriminatory in its nature, or we will continue to see violence perpetuated when we have a solid constitution. I've not talked about gender, and I can see Cecilia is asking me, what about misogyny and sexism? The level of intimate spousal abuse in this country is unacceptable, and we are not doing enough about it. So let me just concur with the idea that civic education is where we need to go, and hopefully, as Amnesty and all the other organizations, we will be allowed to continue doing that work, because I think it is really what will save us in the long run. Let me very directly invite Honorable Kimani. You have spoken many times about criminalization of enforced disappearances. Allow me to encourage you to encourage the committee to support you on the idea that one area where we do need legal reform, it is in that area. Because we cannot allow for people to come in our midst to execute people, drop them from helicopters in rangelands or in conservancies and get away with it. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak this morning. Allow me to end, as I am instructed to by my board, to invite you all to become members of Amnesty International Kenya. We are a membership organization, and actually, as I look at some of you, I know you are our members. I shall not state which members are here, but we are non-partisan, independent, and therefore Kenyans. And for those of you whose children are members of Amnesty International, I also acknowledge you in this moment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Coach.
Well, thank you so much. As I said earlier, for your eloquence of presentation, clarity of thought, and thank you for taking our comments. We have some people waiting online, and we want to be able to move to the next level. Thank you so much, Amnesty.
Asanteni. We have next, we want to have the immediate former commissioners, Wafula Chebukati, Abdi Gulie, Boya Molu, and I'm told they have a letter. I don't know, Secretariat. We want to have them now, then we want to have the other group of 4 other former commissioners, Juliana Cherera and Irene Masitu, will be virtual. Francis Wanderi and Justice Nyangaya, who are physically here. We have received a letter that was sent by email to our secretary this morning, and I think it's only fair that I read it, by Commissioners Wafula Chebukati, Professor Gulie, and Boya Molu. And they say reference made to our letter dated September 25, 2023, inviting them to appear and make representations on all or any of the 5 thematic areas on Thursday, today, 28 September 2023. They say we were appointed into office on January 18, 2017 for a 6-year term and successfully completed our tour of duty on January 17, 2023. We have gone through the 5 thematic areas and would like to inform you that we do not wish to make any submissions before the committee. Our decision is informed by our perspective that the issues being addressed by the committee are either within the mandate of other agencies or have been resolved by the legally mandated agencies. For instance, the conduct of the 2022 elections has been the subject of litigation by courts across the country. And with respect to the presidential poll, a final determination was made by the Supreme Court. It is neither our wish nor our desire to participate in a process whose outcome would be to sully the Constitution and some of its organs. During our term in office, we delivered our mandate, including successful conduct of the 2022 general elections. It is through those elections that the president, governors, senators, members of the National Assembly, and those of county assemblies now occupy their offices. Some of them are now members of this committee. They know themselves. The discharge of our constitutional and legal mandate, as detailed above, is self envisaging. It is our fervent hope that in due course, a commission of inquiry will be set up to investigate the unfortunate incidences of August 15th, 2022 at Bomas of Kenya, which brought the image of our country into disrepute. The inquiry should also uncover the reasons why some of the commission staff were abducted, tortured, or even killed during the election period, identify persons responsible for those atrocities, and thereafter appropriate punishment should be meted out. The outcome of such an inquiry will bolster the independence of IEBC and ensure that it maintains the stature contemplated in the Constitution of Kenya. With tremendous respect to the committee, our participation in the talks would be an unmitigated betrayal to the staff who were tortured, murdered, and an unfortunate reward for impunity. We thank you for the invitation, and the letter is signed by Commissioner Wafula Chebukati, WW Chebukati, EGH, Professor A.Y. Gulie, PhD, EBS, and Boya Molu, EBS. So members, you have that, and I think it has been circulated. Yes,
How do we treat it? I think it's a presentation.
Advantage.
Sorry. Yeah, please.
Maybe I don't know if we could proceed with other witnesses first,
Yes.
and then delve into this one, because I've got serious issues with this letter. The co-chairs, very, very serious issues. Given the condescending language.
Why don't we then go with your own advice?
Yes.
We deal with this and then we can come to it.
Perhaps yes, but it should go on record. Maybe. Because I thought that the two avenues of coming before this committee, one is by self-application, that you apply, you want to come before us, or we invite you when you feel you have got some information that you can help us with to deliver on our mandate. So I think
maybe we can discuss after we hear this group.
Yes, yes.
But again, you know, we had two modes of submission, either in writing or by memoranda. We invite, as a committee, we invite people, is their choice whether to appear or not. This group, and we wanted to hear both groups, those who served their term to the end, those who left the commission before the end of their term. Wanderi, Nyangaya, Masit, and
Co-chair, I hear you.
Cherera have opted to appear. So I would,
You know,
I would rather we discuss that after.
I'd rather we dispense with this.
Yes.
You know,
You want us to dispense
Can.
with it in the presence
you know,
of
Chair.
Yes.
These Kenyans.
I hadn't finished.
Sorry. Okay.
I had not finished. But, you know, we were just responding to what you had proposed, and I think you are making sense that for those who have honored our invitation and have come here,
we deal with it.
let us deal with them.
Yes.
Then we go back to this because it's a serious matter, and even the tone and the arrogance displayed by Chebukati
Absolutely.
is not a matter we not let go easily.
What is
Yes, go on.
Yes, yes.
yeah, first of all, I think when we invite people, it's really up to them to decide to come or not to come. There's no, we cannot force people to come before this committee. They come voluntarily. I think that's the way I have always assumed things to be. And so I think it is in order for them not to want to come for their own personal reasons or collective reasons, which they have stated here. So I think we just need to let it be and listen to those who will come before us.
Chair, also to just add to that discussion, there's not a single memorandum we have discussed substantively so far. So we can treat this as memorandum because it was sent by email. Number two, there are various groups that we have invited that have not honored our invitation. They might not have written, and therefore it cannot be read as contempt just because the content is not pleasant to ourselves. So therefore, I think we respect their position, and I join your own proposal, seconded by Eugene and seconded by co-chair, that we proceed with those who have availed themselves here. Then we can come back to it.
But only on one condition. There's no way we can treat this as a memorandum, but let's discuss it.
We discuss after.
Okay, thank you.
As proposed by the leader of minority. And now welcome Commissioner Wanderi, Commissioner Nyangaya, and I'm told Commissioner Irene Masit, if Secretariat you can confirm they're online, and Commissioner Juliana Cherera. Oh, yeah, they are behind me. So, commissioners, I believe you would know everybody in the room, so we'll spare you the agony of introductions. Do you? You can confirm if you know everybody in the room.
Yes, I do know everybody.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I do know everybody in the room.
Perfect. And we all know you, so we will not get into introductions.
I know some members.
Okay, you have Senator Omogeni right there. Omogeni, you can raise up your hand. Honorable Eugene Wamalwa, Honorable Pio Andai, Leader of Minority, Deputy Leader of Delegation, His Excellency Kalonzo Musyoka, the Leader of Delegation, Governor Cecily Marire, Governor Embu, and Deputy Leader of Delegation, Senator Omar, Mheshimiwa Catherine Wambilianga, and myself, Kimani Shongwa, Leader of Delegation and Co-Chair, together with His Excellency Kalonzo Musyoka. We have two members who are away, Senator Aaron Cheruyot and Honorable Amina.
Well, thank you. I think this is mine. We therefore take this opportunity to welcome you to make your presentation, at the end of which you allow the members of the committee to put a few questions. Indeed, so I don't know whether we have your other two colleagues online already, and who is going to begin the presentation?
I will.
You will. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, co-chairs and members of the National Dialogue Committee. We are privileged to be here, and we have confidence that we are speaking to the committee that will take some or a few of our recommendations for the benefit of reforming IEBC. And we have my colleagues, Cherera, Juliana, Commissioner, and Masit, Irene, Commissioner, myself, and Commissioner Francis Wanderi will be mainly making this intervention. We will possibly also invite Commissioners Cherera and Masit to intervene at some stage when they so wish. Otherwise, I would like to ask Commissioner Wanderi to have the first presentation of our memorandum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Co-Chair and members of the National Dialogue Committee. We did present a written memorandum to the committee, and we are here to elaborate on some of the points which we think.
Maybe, Commissioner, have you shared the same with the Secretariat? Secretariat, maybe you can avail copies to members. We don't seem to have it in our files. Are you making copies, Emigen? Okay, then you can continue. They will share as you.
Thank you. So our presentation will cover certain areas. One, the role of the chairperson of IEBC, in the resort path, particularly the area of tallying and declaration of the resorts. We will also cover the areas of corporate governance within IBC and areas where we think there are certain conflicts within IBC, either between the commissioners and the secretariat, the commission and the secretariat. We will also be looking at some recommendations of what we think needs to be done. So I will start by saying that the process of tallying and declaration of presidential results is shared between the commission and the chairperson. The role of declaring is purely the responsibility and the mandate of the chairperson of IBC. The tallying and the tabulation of the results is the role of the commissioners. And here, when I talk about the commission, I'll be talking about the commissioners. The secretariat is separate. So, in our last election, or before the last election, 2020 general election, there was a decision that was determined by the Court of Appeal in a case that was taken by Maina Kiai and IBC, where it was very clearly stated by the Court of Appeal that the role of the chairman is to declare results that have been tallied by the commissioners. So that was done before the 2017 election. However, as we came to 2022 elections, sorry to say that the chairman of the commission did not follow that decision of the Court of Appeal. And you can, it is available in the 2017 case, IBC versus Maina Kiai and others. The chairperson, acting unilaterally with the assistance of some tallying clerk members of staff of IBC, which he had picked himself, acted in violation of the Constitution and in the violation of the law. Let's look at the areas of governance of the IBC. Under Article 249, the Commission is independent, and the objective of its independence are to protect the sovereignty of the people of Kenya and secure and the state organs to observe the Constitution. There are persistent grievances and issues in the Commission relating to the scope of the responsibility of the commissioners, the secretariat, and the accountability of the secretariat to the Commission. IBC Act, Section 11A, stipulates that the role of the secretariat is to run the day-to-day is to manage the day-to-day running of IBC. However, the commission is a full-time commission where the commissioners run the business of the commission in conjunction with the secretariat. The commission interacts directly and essentially controls all aspects of management, including planning, execution, human resource governance, and the supervision of the staff. So the commission and the secretariat, you find that there's that responsibility of the commission and the secretariat that are tend to work in conflict with one another. So if you look at our history as a country, we have had conflict at the commission between the secretariat and the commissioners. We have in case in 2013 of Hassan and Oswago. In 2017, we had the case of Wafula Chebukati and Ezra Shiromba that played in the, seriously, we have had a litany of conflicts at IBC between the commission and the secretariat. We also had cases of conflict between Wafula Chebukati and the three other commissioners, Wafula Chebukati and Akombe, and finally, Wafula Chebukati and the four commissioners. There must be something that is not right, either about the person who was holding the office or the structure, or both. And that, to me, is something that I would plead with this committee to deal with, because all the years we have had commissioners being taken away or moving out of the commission, they are chased away, but nobody, no investigation have been carried to determine what is the cause of this. Probably you are the privileged committee to address that issue for the sake of our future as a country. And I would plead that you look at which areas are conflicting. We'll give our proposals, but mainly we'll be looking at you to look at that. I also want to look at the removal of the four commissioners, generally known as the Shelela Four. I want to submit that the Shelela Four were forced to resign. It was never our intention to resign. And therefore, we'd want to ask that the reason why the Shelela Four were removed from office is because they questioned the process that the chairman used to declare the result. And my colleague will be coming to that in a short while. Our dissent to the way the chairman handled the tallying of the results in 2022 election was within our mandate, because it is for the commission to tally and for him to declare. Unfortunately, the commission was not offered an opportunity to do that. We never tallied the results from the constituencies, and they were tallied by a hand-picked number of people who worked with the chairman. Two, we want to submit to this committee that there is a prescribed format for declaring a member of parliament, a governor, a woman rep, all elected positions. And there is a statutory form that should be filled to show the result of that particular person. For our case, we as the commissioners, it is for the presidential result, they are supposed to fill Form 34C, which is a summary of all the results from all the constituencies in the country. That is the result form. We want to submit that that was never submitted to us. What we got from the CEO from the CEO then to the chairman and the commissioners is a three or four page summary of all the counties, the 47 counties. So as we sit, we have never seen Form 34C, which is the presidential resort form. And that is the reason why we say it was unfair for us to be forced out of the commission, and we hope that that will be looked into. Now, our recommendation, as we move to our recommendation, one, we hope that sooner than later, the IBC Commission is going to be reconstituted as quickly as possible. There are several issues, including biodine delimitation, which is a very urgent issue. We are hoping that as soon as possible, the commission is going to be reconstituted. Now, number two, the commission, acting as a technical full-time commission, is essentially not only non-strategic, it is also policy-oriented. It must have elaborate rules for the commissions, responsibility of the commissioners, a framework to organize the commission in such a way that the commissioners are responsible for the directorate they head. What we have currently is a situation whereby the CEO of the commission is running the commission. However, the commissioners head certain committees. I'll give you an example. When I was at the commission, I was the chairman of Finance and the Supply Chain Committee. However, in the law, the work of the supply chain, the person who is answerable is the CEO. According to the Public Finance Management Act, he is the same person responsible for the finances of the commission. What is the role of a chairman of a committee like that one in IBC, even if you are a commissioner? Literally nothing. And that is what we find. And these are the legal issues which you think the structure of the commission needs to be addressed. And unfortunately enough, the Supreme Court did address itself and said that there needs to be the corporate governance within the commission need to be addressed. What we are proposing is that, one, we would like to request or to consider that we use the Ghanaian model of the commission, whereby we are suggesting the chairman of the commission with two deputies becomes the accounting officer. They are full-time commissions. We're suggesting that the commission be led by the chairman and the commissioners who are full-time and accountable. So the accounting officer of the IBC should be the chairman of IBC, so that we do not have a law whereby the resources are being accounted for by the secretariat and the commission is just there to oversee or to oversight. The responsibility of the commission to manage the elections in any country is very high. Therefore, I would suggest that we do not consider the commission like other parastatals or board of governors organizations. The Ghanaian model also, I would suggest in the selection of the select committee that is going to be used to interview the commissioners. The Ghanaian model is also very good. I suggest that you can look at it. You don't have to adopt it, but you can adopt it according to what you want as a country to fit our country. I'm suggesting because the chairman of the Electoral Commission of Ghana is a former Chief Justice. Then they also have a former Chief of General Staff, a former IG of the police, and the other commissioners. But that team in our country, I was also going to suggest that probably Council of Governors should be members of the select committee. You could have two people. one from the minority, one from the majority. These are our suggestions. It's for consideration. Finally, the distinction must be made where the law or the constitution provides the mandatory function of the commission. For instance, under Article 138, the commissioners have direct role in the verification, declaration of presidential results. In relation to such, the CEO, for example, last election, the CEO and Professor Gulie were the ones who were given the mandate by the chairman of IBC to do the tally. That information was not. That was not a delegated responsibility by the commissioners to the CEO. And it is an appointment that was made by Mr. Chebukati. I don't think that is within the law. So with those few remarks, I wish to ask my brother to take up the next part of presentation. Asanteni sana.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Commissioner Wanderi. May I add that the process of election in Kenya must observe several values. And these are the values upon which any election can actually be judged upon. It is simple, it is secure, it is accurate, it is accountable, it is verifiable, and it is transparent. If we don't have any of those or some of those in the values of running an election, then we know that we are doing very badly. The Maina Kiai and the IBC case that came up shortly before the 2017 elections was around the issues of Article 86 and 138 of the Constitution and Section 39 of the Elections Act. And the upshot of the decision was, in fact, of timely electronic transmission of the election results, and also the materiality of results transmitted electronically, and essential consistency with results transported physically for tallying at the constituency tallying center. The effect of the Maina Kiai decision and amendments to Section 44 and 39 were intended to give effect to Articles 86 and 138 by legislating mandatory electronic transmission, which mirrors and has the same effect as the physically transmitted results declaration forms through the physical tabulation chain. And this is the reason why the country spent millions of money to secure an electronic voter system. Now, I just want to talk about the accountability of polling station results. And this is how this worked. And it worked according to how we had discussed. That by operation of Section 39, the Commission is statutorily required to electronically transmit tabulated results and an image of the result declaration form confirming the authenticity of the polling station results. The process for accountability of presidential results contemplated three things in order to achieve the verifiability and accountability under Article 89. First, the presiding officers are expected to send, one, a tabulated result of the polling station. Two, the image of the polling station results declaration form. And three, physical result declaration forms transferred to the returning officer. The technology investment by the Commission ensured the presiding officers could transmit tabulated polling station results concurrently with the image of the result declaration forms. The tabulated results will give the country a running tally of the results on real-time basis. As the Secretariat and the Commission and the country were tabulating, the running results from the fields will be seen on the screen. The tabulated results will give the country a running tally of the result on real-time basis. The presiding officers are also required to transmit the image of the result declaration form based on time stamps, location stamps, KIMS QR code, serial numbers, and other specifications provided in the KIMS technology. That is how it was envisaged. Now, how did we do it? The chairperson unilaterally took the decision to deny the country the benefit of a running tally based on tabulated results as a countercheck of the transmitted images and the results declared in the constituency tallying centers and the national tallying center. This was stopped. As commissioners, we therefore did not know the running tabulation. People at home that were doing this with us also were at a loss. It is because we stopped doing this. Some of us discussed this with the chairman and said, 2017 is a bad memory for IEBC. That is the time that the organization was accused of, I think it was called the Vifaranga computer thing. We were manufacturing results. And I said, Mr. Chairman, you need to organize this. And he said, I am busy right now, but I will sort it out later. It was never sorted out. By IEBC taking an ad hoc administrative decision in violation of Section 39 and sending an image, it ensured that it did not tabulate the electronic results. This deliberately put the country in the dark and results remain indeterminate. Secondly, the IEBC failed to undertake electronic tabulation and publication of constituency tallying of presidential results. This violation had two effects. One, it ensured that the country had no electronic source to countercheck the results obtained from the portal, nor did it have the benefit of tabulated results by the institution that is constitutionally mandated to undertake tabulation. This shifted, therefore, the returning officer's obligation under Article 86 and 138 to the chairman as the sole returning officer working with officials at the tallying center who have no statutory role or clear procedure of delegation by the commissioners. It ensured neither us as commissioners nor the country had effective accountability framework for the results. That was the upshot of that. The effect of the violations, willful omissions, and an ad hoc decision by the chairman ensured that the investment in the KIMS was not used to achieve the objectives of transparency, determinacy, and accountability of presidential election results. It effectively resulted to keeping the country in the dark for too long, giving undue power to the chairperson in collusion with his preferred selection of commissioners and unaccountable staff, in total alienation of ourselves. The result management framework of the 2022 presidential election effectively mirrored 207 presidential declaration and derogated the gains of the Constitution of Kenya 2010, 2016 amendments to the Elections Act. Minor care decision and immense investment in technology were all had gone down the drain. We maintain our position that the results of the 2022 presidential election are indeterminate, as they were neither tabulated nor verified by the commissioners in accordance with the process contemplated under Article 138. And what then had happened, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, is that we thought, or rather Mr. Chairman thought, that the title chair of the commission and commission are the same thing. So if he was acting on behalf of the commission, as the chair, then commissioners need not have to be there. Some of the disputes, and this is what I want to say, as commissioners, we had areas of concern that we needed to discuss with the chair. We had conflict even while we were at the commission. And what then can we do? What are some of the recommendations that we can make that when a commissioner or commissioners have a problem or with a chair that does things unilaterally, do we just sit and watch, or there is a body that can come in place?
Chair, point of order. It would appear that the other participants have been cut off. So we need to understand how we can proceed. I suggest we pause.
And are you certain, Secretariat, that they can hear us? Are we making any progress? Probably, Nyangai will ask you as you resume to try and be a bit quick if we still have to hear them. Or we allow them to, when they come on, to have their take first.
Yeah, indeed, based on Wanderi's presentation, I think we can allow them to come on.
Yeah.
And then you.
Is that okay?
Okay.
we
Because you
stand
never know.
guided.
Because of these technological challenges,
Yeah.
you never know when it will go up again and disrupt us.
Yeah. Okay.
Depending on where
But
they
also
are.
when you come back yourself, try and be a bit quick.
All right, thank you.
Desist from taking us through the entire Supreme Court process. Kenyans watch the whole process on live TV every day. So do not re-litigate the case. The case was litigated in the Supreme Court, and the committee will not litigate again. Are they back? Is this a JC Rucha? So Commissioner Masit, Commissioner Cherera, if we can hear us. Are you sure they're online? They've muted, or you have muted. Commissioners Masit and Commissioner Cherera, can you hear us? Confirm.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you and welcome. I'm certain you may know all the members of this National Dialogue Committee, so we'll not go back to the introductions. If anything, we did that, and I'm sure you are following us. We have just changed the model. Before Commissioner Nyang'aya finishes, we hear from you because of the technological challenges that may keep popping up. So we'll ask you in a few minutes to have your take, then we'll resume to what was. Is Commissioner Masit on? Commissioner Masit is muted.
Thank you, co-chairs and the honorable committee. Thank you for the opportunity to be invited to give our recommendations.
Sorry, I'm on, eh? Sorry, my other channel. Tell them I'm on. Sorry. Thank you.
Karibu, Commissioner Masit. Cherera, you may continue.
Thank you.
We did submit a written memorandum to the committee, and we stand by that. We only want the good of the commission and our country. What we as the four commissioners were taken through is not something that we wish any other commissioner when appointed to be taken through what we went through. So in the good faith of our country, we want the next generation of commissioners at IBC be people that will be handled with integrity that it deserves. And their voice will not be shut down because as commissioners, we were there in the kitchen. We know what happened. Some of these things need to be spoken in a safe space. Commissioners, past and every generational commissions, and even to make it wider, the constitutional commissions that are there, they have something to give back to our country. Having commissioners and chasing them away, we lose a lot of the investment that the country puts on them. We only wish that we can have a safe space to talk about these things.
Recording in progress.
So that any other commissioner that is employed at IBC will not be there just because of the salary, but will be there to ensure that things are done right and integrity is preserved. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cherera. Commissioner Masit. She disappeared again. Commissioner Masit. Is she the one in steps? She muted again. Text her if she's somewhere.
Okay.
Hello?
Can we ask you a question before you disappear? Maybe you hear Commissioner
I think
Masit.
Masit is back.
Yeah.
We can hear you
We
now,
can hear
Masit.
you, Masit.
You can hear me?
We can hear you. If you don't mind, if you can touch your video icon.
Thank you so much. Yes, it's the wind where I am. And thank you, bipartisan committee. Thank you, all members, for giving us this opportunity. I want to just say a few words because, as you know, I still have a case in court. I have appealed at the Human Rights and Constitutional Court on my removal, and some things are being canvassed in court. But I want to say in brief, what was done in Bomas was not verification and tallying of elections. When we were announcing, all of us, what we were announcing were handwritten summaries, which were to be taken, to be typed, and to be brought back for commission, and each commissioner to check what they had written and what they had been typed, if it is in order. It went one way. Two, when the results came, it came only in 3 pages. And it was a summary in counties which exceeded 100%. That's where the dispute started from. How could we announce results which are over 100%, and we have not been given Form 34C or summaries we wrote from constituencies to confirm whether what we announced and what had been kept is the same? Up to today, we've never seen from 34C. Again, what happened in Bomas, we had not finished even announcing 27 constituencies. The screen was technically put up for Kenyans not to see what was going on. And when we asked it, it became an issue. Informers were removed from our committees. I chair legal affairs committee. That's what I used to chair. But 1 week to election, chairman wrote us letters, putting me logistics, welfare, and security with Wandel, putting Cherera at the communication center, Nyangaya protocol, to remove us from results and assign results to Collier and Marchand only, with letters written specifically which are part of the process which are in court. We were never involved, we were never told anything, and when we wanted to say, they said we wanted to overturn the people. Yet, when the security team came, there were no results. There was nothing. Even we could not even talk of results because at that time there were no results. If anything, they just said there was tension in the country, and there was no stream showing, and we are taking so long. We should ask them to ease the tension in the country. So up to now, we don't know the results, and it's very important that we audit these results. Very, very important, because when we audit and even made open to everybody, even those people who have been elected and who lost as MPs, and even others, they will know their results. Because I want to say, this was not tallying, there was no tallying, there was no verification. It was just, it is not, I don't know what to say about it as a commission. It's a shame for our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Masit. And Cherera, please, we'll ask you to just stay online. We take a few questions.
Yeah, I want to go first. Why are you not here with us? Is it because of security concerns on the part of 2 of you? Of course, we take note of what Commissioner Masita said. Some of the matters are still in court, but for the benefit of the country, are you safe? Why are you out of the country? Thank you.
Yes, Chair.
Maybe first confirm whether you're out of the country.
I'm outside of the country for security reasons.
Okay.
Remember, I come from Rift Valley. Before that, even they said I betrayed the community. In the Facebook, in all social media, I was saying, I've never stepped in my home since that time. I've never even gone beyond my room. That time, I got calls, people telling me to drop the case. What am I doing? So many things, but I believe it's my constitutional right because I know what I did and what I didn't do. So it is because of security reasons. I'm out of the country and we're not doing even well because even the salaries we had, they were stopped. Even the 1/3 when I'm doing the case. So we are living at the mercy of people outside. So Commissioner Cherera talk on myself, but mine is a long story. I don't want to say so many details because I told you other case it was because of security reasons. Thank you.
Irene, this is Eugene Wamala. We're in college together.
Yes, we are actually the same year.
You're on campus together at the university. Yes, you know, Ishunga likes saying the school because we went to our land, but I was at the University of Nairobi. We're very sorry to hear that.
On a light note, at least now we know how you know Commissioner Irene.
We are. No, Irene, we are sorry to hear that you're out of the country, and literally from what you're explaining, because the whole country is listening, it's like you're in exile or something. Did you receive specific threats? What about your family? Are they in the Rift Valley? Have they also moved out of the country with you? And is Commissioner Cherera also under the same situation, being away from the country, not by choice, but literally in exile? Is that the situation with Commissioner Cherera as well? And sorry.
Thank you, Co-Chair, for that question. It's a very emotive question. You heard when Commissioner Masit was responding. She was really shaken, and it has taken a toll to all of us. I, being the vice chair and the voice behind the mic, and the team being dubbed by my surname, Cherera 4. I am in my late 40s, and I have a young family. My last born is 7 years old. It was bad even in school. Our social life was really thwarted. It was bad for my children. It was bad for my family. And I said some of things we cannot say them on camera because it is not a safe space for all of us. We've been threatened just because we spoke what we saw and what we know. Personally, I was in charge of communication at Bomas. I used to get information and statements from the commission, and I give it out to the media. The screens were there to help the same, but came on Friday evening, the screens were stopped. Everyone used to come to me to get information. And you know, part of communication is the transparency bit that is a requirement in any election. I could not give people that information. I asked the chair that we refresh the screens so that Kenyans can see how many votes we have tallied, how many are remaining, and of course, it was going to be helpful for the country to see the trend and also prepare them to the end. Of course, if it remains like 5,000 votes, people already know how this election has gone. But that was stopped, and it was not something that we had agreed in the commission plenary. I asked about this 2 times, and the chairman said that he was busy tallying. And this tallying, he was doing it alone with selected few. So all of us, even me as the vice chair, was kept out of this information. And that's why, even today, we will stand by our word that we disown this election presidential result because it was tallied by a few and it was not verified. As we were reading the constituency results, there were queries that were coming on our desk. We needed to get to know how these queries have been resolved to come to the final tally, but all that was not forthcoming. So our voice to disown the results has brought a lot of economic, social, negative impact to ourselves and to our family. When the security was withdrawn, it was withdrawn from our home and our personal security. And at that time, mandamanos were almost starting. And let me be very clear with the committee. It was said even on that fateful Sunday when people gathered in a church somewhere, I can't remember. And after the sermon was just Terera 4 should resign, Terera 4 should resign. And after that, the opposition started saying that they will go to the street because of Terera 4, they should not resign. As a Kenyan, loving the citizens of this country, that was the day I decided that Kenyans will not go to the streets in my name and blood be shed. Monday morning, I resigned after that Sunday. I did not resign because of myself. I didn't come to the commission to resign. I resigned for the sake of this country. If anyone is to fight for me, God will fight my battles. We conclude that since even to date, the commission published the 2022 presidential election, I want to submit that this election be audited. The servers should be opened and a forensic audit should happen. Let us put this thing to rest. After the audit, let us move on. But I will leave it to the committee and the country decide. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chere and Commissioner Masit. And maybe Commissioner Masit, there is a question, specific question that Honorable Eugene asked you. Did you receive any specific threats? And as you answer that, I put a rider to it. Were those specific threats from any specific people? Did you report them to the police? Have you recorded any statements of such threats? To Commissioner Cherera, you have indicated that you resigned, but there was an assertion that you had been forced to resign. From what you have said, it looks like circumstances around the calls for demonstrations and calls for your resignation is what made you resign, and you have asserted that you resigned to save the country from bloodshed and people dying in your name. My third question to you, Commissioner Cherera, you say you spoke on behalf, and you have rightly put it, the 4 of you are Christian, the Cherera 4. Maybe Kenyans liked you more than, liked your face more than, because you are more on TV, being in charge of communication, and that's why they were Christian, the Cherera 4. But, is she still there? Yes, okay. But you have asserted that you would communicate on behalf of the commission. You have both asserted that you did not see any Form 34C. You did not tally. But Commissioner Cherera, I do remember you somewhere around Serena announcing results. What results were you announcing? Where did that tally come from, if you were not involved in any tally? And why did you not adduce that evidence before the Supreme Court? And as I said, we are not litigating the Supreme Court again. But why did you not adduce evidence before the Supreme Court that not a single 34C was seen by yourselves? You did not adduce any single form that differed from the forms that were on the portal. The Supreme Court verified those results that were in the portal. And you did not, why did you not then? Did you not trust, because there are things you are saying you cannot tell us, did you not also trust the Supreme Court of this Republic?
Thank you,
Thank
Chair.
you.
I can come
Thank you,
back.
Chair.
Then,
Maybe Masit can go first.
yeah, because mine are few. Thank you, Chairman. One, I want to say for record that I was strengthened actually before I resigned. And that one, it's on record in my case in court. And my lawyer is aware. My lawyer is Donald Kikori. And I think if you want to hear more, maybe you can invite him to shed more light, because that is in court. But I was threatened that time, that one I said, but this one, it was urgent. I could not do it because I could not report because people followed me. I ignored for some time, but that night on Saturday, going to Sunday morning, people came to around my gate, and I had to sneak actually with pajamas through the back door gate, took a motorbike, went to, let me disclose the committee in confidence, went to Nanaya because I could not trust them.
Commissioner.
Yes.
I would just beg you answer the question straight up. Did you report to the police? Because that was more of the direct question. Or you reported to your lawyer, Donald Kipkorir? Are you still online? She has muted the mic.
Are you hearing me? I'm on the line.
Yeah, we were pleading.
Yes.
Instead of narrating the circumstances, the question was rather direct as to whether you reported specific threats to the police, other than to your lawyer.
The police. I reported to the lawyer, the first one, but the second one I didn't have time because those people were closing in on me, and the only thing was to take a motorbike to the airport with my passport.
So the straight answer is that you never reported to the police.
And left the country that night.
You never reported to the police, you reported to lawyer Donald Kipkorir.
No, there were two threats. The first one is to the lawyer, because I was still in the country. The second one, when I left the country, it was at night. I took a motorbike to the airport, paid cash, and I was the last one in the manifest, and I left that night. I didn't have even time to report because I was saving my life that time.
So you did not report to the police?
Yes, I didn't report that one when I was leaving.
Because
I told my
the
lawyer,
incident, let me get it right, Commissioner, the incident happened at night?
Yes.
You took a motorbike at night?
At night?
To the airport?
I left the country at night.
You left the country at night? Meaning you also got the ticket at night? And a plane was waiting for you at night? Okay.
That night around, yes, late night.
You had a ticket ready?
I think the last one.
With a ticket ready for an international? National flight?
I caught it. I had to get a connection from Kenya to Amsterdam because that time I didn't have an invitation to US where I am. I had a ticket for Canada. I had a visa for Canada and US, but for Canada.
Commissioner Masit, I'm asking another very direct question to you. Canada. Commissioner Masit, I am asking another very direct question to you.
Yes.
An incident happened at night. You took a border at night.
No, night. The incident happened of night of Saturday.
Saturday night.
Okay.
And you.
Saturday night. Then I disappeared on Saturday night.
The same night.
Colleagues' place. Hello. And stayed there to organize for a ticket on Sunday night.
So you left on Sunday night.
Sunday night, yes, because I had to get cash to have it paid, and I had to get
okay. Maybe that's good enough. I'm sorry, I'm pushing you. I'm just trying to save time. Yes. Maybe Honorable Commissioner Cherea can answer the other questions.
Finally, before I finish, Chair, allow me just to say thank you to Honorable Eugene Wamalo. He's my yearmate at the University of Nairobi. When I was doing law, I was doing here, and then I went to do law later. That's the reason why I could not resign, because the truth has to come out. Somebody has to stand for my colleagues who that time also they were facing the same, but I had to. The fact that I come from Rift Valley, Nobody wants to see me there. I'm vilified. I'm called a betrayer, traitor. They say even the chair is worse than a murderer. That's what they call me nowadays. I was removed from all WhatsApp groups, and I'm suffering here. You people, you need to listen to us.
We sincerely
of elections. Thank you.
thank you, Commissioner Irene. We sincerely sympathize with you, and we pray for your safety wherever you are and whenever you come back here. But we would encourage you to have all those reports made to the police so that if there are specific threats, they're investigated. Commissioner Cherera.
I cannot come now until you are ready. Thank you.
Commissioner Cherera.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Co-Chair, you said that at Serena we had our own results. I wish that committee will play the clip at Serena Hotel. We did not have our own results. What we said is that the results that were going to be announced, we disown them because of the manner of opaqueness that last phase was handled. That's what we said. We didn't say that we had our own results. That's why we are saying now that result needs to be audited. And this is not of our own. It is even in law that any elections needs to be verifiable and can be audited at any other particular time. So it is not something that will begin now. It is there in the Election Act. We emphasize that it should be audited and the servers to be opened.
Chair, Chair, my name is Catherine and my sister Cherera. In your own words, you said the results were handwritten and the results even exceeded 100%. And how come you never mentioned this to the Supreme Court? You're mentioning it to us here. And those you brought as even the substantiators of the same never brought it and never, substantiated anything. In your own words, surely.
Honorable Committee, I
Commissioner,
invite you
Commissioner,
to my affidavit to the Supreme Court. Whatever we are saying now, it is in our affidavit that we filed at the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, it's like nothing or not everything was read through. We explained everything that we said. And after the Supreme Court gave its ruling, we said we abide by that because it is the apex court of our country. And as law-abiding citizens, we said, yes, we accept it. And from that day henceforth, the Cherera folk have never spoken until today. Let me submit to this honorable committee that everything we have said, it is in our affidavit.
Okay, the Commissioner, I will request that you allow us, you just stay online, hear a few more questions, then you can note them and answer them together. Honorable says, Governor says.
Thank you, Chair. Let me appreciate the two commissioners, Masit and Cherera, who have seen it fit to participate in this sitting, and we appreciate that they're there. I have a few questions, and not necessarily to Cherera or Masit. I think even the commissioners physically present here may want to answer. Number one, the law has been that the final announcement of the presidential vote is actually what is announced at the polling station. And that is what is called the Form 34A. And we have 46,229 polling stations that I need no mention. But I'm just wondering, when Commissioner Wanderi says that they were not tallying as commissioners, did you actually think that the 7 commissioners had the capacity to physically tally the 46,229 forms and be able to give the results within 7 days as the law states. Number two, the matter went before the Supreme Court as a petition. Would you say that the results declared by the chairman were inconsistent with, in any way, with those that were declared at the polling stations? And that brings me to the final statement by Cherera, where she says she wants the server to be opened. And that has been the language, open the server. The secretariat was here, the IEBC secretariat was here. And I remember I personally asked the question of the server because I thought we need to understand what's in the server. And the ICT director said, whatever is in the server is exactly what is in the public portal. That any Form 34A is what they have stored in the server. There's no difference. So what is it you want the server to produce if there was no inconsistency? Or maybe you know of an inconsistency that you should have taken before the Supreme Court. So was there any inconsistency? I think that's the bottom line.
Can I also? I wanted to also, this is Hassan Omar. And I, like Cecily, because I probably would want you also to benefit from some of the questions we will pose to your two colleagues here. You know, I had a lot of reference to the Maina Kiai case, but the true import of the decision of the Maina Kiai case is that what is declared at the polling station is the actual result of that election. This tallying you're talking about is simply arithmetic. In fact, today I look at I look up to God and say, the systems were so foolproof that our elections cannot be decided by 4 or 7 people. The whole world was monitoring. And in fact, this idea of the server is almost an idea to try and camouflage the fact that there was a result which was verified and those forms that were tallied. Not a single one of you came up with a challenge to meet up, as suggested by Justice Smoking Wanjala, to show one single form signed by your returning officers or agents or anybody that differs with those that have been put onto that server. So I think, or into that portal. So I think we should now, even in terms of moving forward, because it's what I've heard Eugene repeatedly here saying how people say that the outcome of this elections was not free and fair. And I can tell you, outside this group and the 4 of you, I don't know of anybody else who says that the outcome of these elections was not free and fair. Number two, I also was a commissioner at a very stormy point of this country's political transition, I think, which birthed the new constitution and some of the state institutions you see. I investigated instances of violence and laid a lot of responsibility on people who ended up becoming presidents of this country, probably the 4th and 5th. I can tell you, when you do your job consciously, there's nothing to fear. People will send you messages. That's why Ongwae Nyangai is still here and others. I can guarantee you, what Kenyans simply wanted was the truth of what happened. The truth in many instances has been canvassed in the Supreme Court. It has been canvassed across board. And I can tell you without a doubt, at least if it is any threat, it cannot be from our side. Our side is totally comfortable with the fact that the truth was canvassed and mitigated and agreed upon and settled. Lastly, there are a lot of other things that we do not want to go into. There is evidence that was adduced about your meetings, the 4 of you, with Tuju in apartments in Upper Hill, paid for by Ngonga, who was my college mate. People who, the National Security Council membership coming here. Senator Wako was clarified why he was here in his personal capacity and the unfortunate circumstances that met him here. The person who was came here on behalf of the Security Council is today's CDF. Trust me, the evidence, if we were to pursue the attempt to sabotage this election, would have been overwhelming. That's why we are saying sometimes, let it rest. Let it rest. I can tell you without a doubt, these matters have been canvassed and settled. I can tell you without a doubt, the truth is in public play. I can tell you without a doubt, some of these lies are no longer holding. They are just a few of you who continue to believe in that narrative, and they'll continue to perpetuate it. But every submission that has come here has actually given credibility to the elections.
Yes, I just wanted to mention something that I think it was Cherera or Commissioner Masik mentioned, that when the security team came, at that point there were no results yet, because there had been an attempt to taint the name of a very distinguished professional career soldier, General Francis Ogola. I think my colleague Omar has referred to that. Thank God, due to the Tonje rules, he is now the CDF. I am happy that you have mentioned that when that team came, they did not come to threaten anyone or to change the results or to overturn. I think for the record, it is important, because that was something that went towards tainting a distinguished career of a career soldier of our country. The second issue is the issue of whether you, the commissioners, tallied these results or not. I think listening to the four of you, you have said you did not. We were hoping Chebukati would be here, the chair, and he has denied the country the opportunity to hear both sides of the story in a very arrogant manner. We'll be dealing with that matter shortly. The tone of his letter, the arrogance, is something we will deal with. I think I would say high-handedness with which you are talking about. And you're not the first commissioners he has differed with. He differed with Commissioner Kombe, differed with the other three commissioners in 2017, with the four of you, with Chiloba. It cannot be that the four commissioners, three commissioners, Commissioner Kombe, Chiloba are all wrong, and only one man called Chebukati is right. There must be something about his personality, which goes to the root of the problem, because Article 138 is very clear, and the matter came up before the commission, before the Supreme Court. Looking at the ruling, particularly clause 48 of that ruling, the chairperson had submitted that the issue of verifying and tallying was his exclusive authority. The Supreme Court differed with him. In the paragraph 49, they were very categorical. And if I may read that, we find that the chairperson cannot arrogate to himself the power to verify and to tally the results of the presidential election to the exclusion of the other members of the commission, meaning yourselves. And indeed, Article 138.10, this is what he's been relying on, because he's saying as a returning officer, it was his prerogative. And they said, indeed, Article 138.10 of the Constitution, although the power to declare the results of a presidential election after verification and tallying is vested in the chairperson, he does so only as a delegate of the commission, one of you having sat, tallied, verified, and you announced. I do remember, and Irene Masit will remember, Isaac Hassan was also our classmate at the university. When he was faced with a similar situation in the previous election, the declaration of the results was delayed for almost 7 hours. When Isaac Hassan sat with his colleagues, they were able to build consensus. And when they came out, They came out as a united commission to make that declaration. Now, the concern of this team is that going into the future, having listened from you, you are sidelined, given peripheral roles, and your co-mandate was not, you're not given the opportunity to exercise it. In future, there's a danger of a rogue chairman. You are 7, this chairman had 2 only, minority supporting him. The majority of you, up to today, have not owned those results, which still casts the shadow on the legitimacy. Even if we say the Supreme Court's ruling was final, many Kenyans, half of this country, did not vote for this president. The majority of that commission did not agree with these results. That shadow can never go away. We are saying those servers be opened, and I'm happy to hear from Terera, you have the view that the servers be opened. Many Kenyans want the audit to be done and the truth to be known. We are very grateful. You have time to appear before us, and like your arrogant chair, who
but I don't think it is fair for you to have constantly. It is also not fair for him to have constantly gone on the vestiges of the character of a person, but of people who are here. But when you start casting aspersion on people who are not here, and to try and derogate their characters because you do not like what he did or what he decided, it's not fair.
And if you make your point,
no, the guilty are afraid. Maybe there's something is afraid.
Honorable
guilty of anything.
Honorable Omar and Honorable Eugene
must stop.
Honorable Omar, we've had you, and maybe we'll just like we protected.
I was actually going to deal with the more serious matters rather than this emotional outburst.
In fact, Vice Chair, I was going to say just like Omar.
That's okay.
Omar.
Fair enough.
I was only saying just like we protected Honorable Eugene from a very lethal attack by a stakeholder, we must equally protect Honorable Chebukati, Commissioner Chebukati, from unwarranted attacks since he's not here to defend himself.
Fair enough, Co-Chair. Let me say this, if we can get back to the issues. It was so nice to listen to the 2 commissioners who are practically in exile, whatever the circumstances, because they fear for their lives. Some of the clarifications you'll probably get from your colleagues. But the important thing is you stick to your guns and you say those results were not proper on account, among other things, of the absence of Form 34C. We heard that from Commissioner Wanderi, that is what actually should have been announced. And even then, and I think actually, come to think of it, these commissioners have afforded us an opportunity as a committee to even do an audit, come to think of it. It's part of a serious auditing we are doing. So we really owe it to them. We'll do the Chebukati matter after this, and I think that should bring closure since he's not here for reasons best known to himself. But Form 34C, up to today, the Commission has never actually published if I understand it correctly, has never published in the official Kenya Gazette the results in accordance with the 290 constituencies plus 1 constituency in the diaspora. Is that correct, Commissioner Wanderi, or indeed the Vice Chair? And what we have is a tabulation from the counties in contravention of what the law says. That was my number 1 question. Honorable Eugene has elaborated very strongly on the other issues. When there was, for more than 7 hours, this we also had, there was a blackout at Bomas. And therefore, the 26 constituencies were then not announced. The understanding was that Professor Gulie was to announce the remaining 26, perhaps with the authority of the chair. What really happened at Bomas? We want to know, because we have heard that according to others that there should be a commission. In fact, that is public knowledge because Chebukati has written an open letter and he says there should be a commission of inquiry to establish what exactly happened at Bomas. What would you say really happened, which gave rise to the confusion? And then, of course, the Supreme Court in its ruling also said that, and I wanted your comment on the Secretariat itself, even as presently constituted. Would you recommend that this committee looks at the work, the composition, the competencies, the heads of those other directorships or directorates? And by the way, were you guys present? I'm sorry, that's unparliamentary. The four of you, did you have any idea whatsoever on the printing? And did any of you go to inspect the printing by this Greek company, which had won? One day you were part of the procurement. Indeed, that was your responsibility. What would you advise the committee with regard to transparency when it comes to printing of election materials? Because we also have it on record that some commission materials were apprehended at the airport. So at that point, you're all acting together. Was it the negligence on the part of the commission as it then was? Yeah, because we have the legal position, which is very clear, the ruling by the Supreme Court, nobody is contesting that. But we have the issue of legitimacy, which is part of the reason I think this committee was constituted. We want your comments because the Supreme Court said that what Chebukati had formed with that team, which was advising him as a chair, which gave him the results to announce. Even the Supreme Court in its ruling, in its finding, announced that, they were able to pronounce themselves on that as an illegal group. So what would you say to all this? And I want to urge that we desist from emotions and emotional outbursts even between the commissioners, because it's beautiful. We are doing the audit. We must continue to thank the media. I'm quite sure this is one subject that is of great interest to the country. Thank you.
Yeah, that is, it's not, there are no emotional outbursts. People are protesting where somebody's character.
No, but you're dealing with lives of Kenyans. We have to, when you want to get a proper cure.
Kenyan's life.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Let me just say
and go for his
one thing. I'll be very brief. Let's have some. Yeah, I'm happy that now we are back to our senses. Mine is very, very brief. And I want to thank the four commissioners for having taken their time to come and shed more light on the issues surrounding these elections. And I also want to thank the host country for giving the two commissioners political asylum. And I hope they are safe. I just wanted to find out before they muted whether the threats they received whilst in Kenya have continued to follow them even in the country of asylum. If you could clarify whether you are still facing these threats in your asylum. Two, I want to know from the commissioners, now all of you, in the final analysis, having said all that you have said, what, in your opinion, could have been the reason for Mr. Wafula Chebukati to single-handedly, together with the chosen clique, undertake the tallying of election results and eventually unilaterally announce them to exclusion? What could have been the motivation? Because that is important. We could speak until the cows come back. But what could have been the motivation for Chebukati to exclude all of you, at least the four of you, from this very vital process, at this very vital moment in the electoral process? Three, And finally, actually, we were told here by the IBC CEO, Mr. Marjan, Hussein Marjan, few days ago, that when he brought the final tally of the presidential election results to the commissioners, I presume he meant the chairperson and the 5 or the 6 of you, that the 4 of you, the now famous Chaera 4, retorted that the margin was too small. I'm just paraphrasing him. The margin was too narrow, and that the results could not be announced, therefore, in the manner they came. I want you to take this opportunity, because this is the only opportunity you have, to respond to that very grave accusation. That immediately you retorted that the margin was too narrow, you took off, that even him, he got surprised, that you took off to Serena, and he only saw you on television. So that was a very serious allegation or accusation leveled against yourselves. What is your take on that? But finally, the 26 or 27 constituencies whose results have not been declared, it is on record, both from the testimony of Marjan when he was here, and also I think in the Supreme Court, that those results were supposed to be declared by Ward Ngulie. What is your take on that?
Declared or announced?
Announced, sorry. To be announced. What is your take on that? And bearing in mind that chaos broke out at Bomas when the chairperson, that is Chebukati, and other commissioners, I think Ngulie and Boya Mod, had climbed down to the podium. So, in your view, was that the moment when these 27 constituency results were going to be announced? Or what was it? Thank you.
Chair, would like to. Yeah.
Because he has not had something, then says, Omogeni says, Catherine, in that order.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, commissioners. Can I have one go? You know, we are here because this is for posterity. We just want to know the truth.
Co-chairs,
Yes.
there are so many questions. I wish you let us respond to some, then we move to others.
I guess this is the final one. Probably.
By the some could be related.
Yeah.
Yeah, just note so that the ones that are related, you don't have to answer me and answer Opio if we ask the same thing. Answer generally.
Yeah, you know, this
we are not in court one day.
this is for historians to record. That's why we are undertaking this process. I remember in 1937 in the US during the reign of Franklin Roosevelt, the fight to defend the Supreme Court of the United States of America. When Roosevelt wanted to add 6 justices to water it down, one senator was so emotional, fought for Roosevelt so hard that in the evening he just collapsed in his room and died, and the president lost the fight. Now, as we want to know the truth from you, the trial of O.J. Simpson, the gloves were given to him, and the jury said, if they fit, you murdered. If they don't, you didn't. The question in the room is how to apply Article 138(3)(c). The Supreme